Deep under Tennessee, massive worm-like drills are about to carve out a tunnel that should turn an hour-long traffic headache into a 10-minute joyride. It could be one of the craziest US tunneling experiments in decades. But on the other side of the planet, Europe and Asia are actively testing the Hyperloop, the vacuum tube technology that seems out of this world. These are two totally different ideas, but they have the same goal: to make sci-fi travel a reality. For the first vision of the future, we have to focus on Nashville. The story here is about a blueprint for something called the Music City Loop. It's a proposal for a private paved underground highway meant for Tesla vehicles. The whole idea is point-to-point travel. You get in, pick a destination, and go straight there without stopping at every station. You can already ride a limited version in Las Vegas around the convention center. Nashville is supposed to be the city-scale test. The proposal is a direct underground link between Nashville International Airport and downtown. The new transit system is supposed to reduce a 9-mile, 40-minute trip to just around 8 minutes. If they pull this off, the experience should be truly futuristic. You hop in a car at the terminal, drop into a tunnel barely wider than the vehicle itself, and shoot through a pressurized tube. You bypass the gridlock, ignore the stoplights, and arrive at your hotel before people on the surface have even merged onto the highway. That all sounds amazing, but how close are we to this reality? The technology technically exists, but it has some massive issues. The system in Vegas is simple and it uses real drivers. To hit that 8-minute promise in Nashville, the cars can't be driven by humans. They'd have to drive themselves bumper to bumper at highway speeds inside a tunnel barely wider than the car. In a space that tight, human reflexes aren't fast enough. One hesitation or malfunction and the entire system turns into a traffic cork. So we need automated driving systems or really cool robots. But before we worry about AI-driven vehicles, there's one other issue. The real problem isn't the tunnel, it's the ground itself. Large parts of Tennessee sit on limestone, a rock that slowly dissolves like a sugar cube in water. Over time, that turns solid ground into something closer to Swiss cheese, filled with hidden caves and empty pockets. That's a problem for any tunneling project here. When a drill hits one of these hidden voids, it doesn't just slow down. It can suddenly break into the open air. Water can rush in. The machine can lose support beneath it. Tunneling here becomes a real-life game of Minesweeper. One unfortunate turn and the machine can fail and sink. Even worse, the collapse can travel upward, opening a sinkhole at the surface, right in the middle of a busy city street. But if the ground is this dangerous, why build this in Tennessee? The reason is simple. Nashville is in the middle of a massive traffic crisis. It's one of the fastest growing cities in America, and the surface roads are already at their breaking point. The city is desperate enough to try anything, even if it means drilling through a geological minefield. Engineers see Tennessee as the ultimate final boss for tunneling. If they can prove that this high-speed system works in limestone full of hidden caves, they can prove it works anywhere on Earth. It's a high-stakes bet. Solve Nashville's gridlock or watch a multi-billion-dollar project disappear into a sinkhole. But while Americans are busy fighting the ground, other parts of the world are trying to avoid it altogether and basically fly through the air. This brings us to the second vision of the future, the Hyperloop. For years, experts rejected this concept as too complex, but development didn't stop. In fact, right now, test tracks in China and Europe are running successful experiments that are breaking speed records. Here is how it works. When you stick your hand out of a moving car, you feel the air push back. The faster you go, the harder it fights you. At extreme speeds, air becomes a solid wall. That invisible wall is what limits how fast trains and planes can go. The Hyperloop solves this by cheating. You build a sealed tube, suck all the air out to create a vacuum, and levitate a pod inside using magnets. With almost no air and no wheel friction, the pod doesn't really roll anymore. It glides through the tube. China is currently leading this race. A state-owned contractor recently sent a pod through a low vacuum tube at 387 miles per hour. That's faster than the Shanghai Maglev, the fastest train in commercial service. And they aren't stopping there. The goal is to hit airplane-like speeds, but achieving those high-speed numbers isn't what's holding this technology back. For a long time, Hyperloop could only go straight, so networks were impossible. However, recently, engineers in the Netherlands found a way to switch lanes in a vacuum tube, bending what was once a single highway into a blueprint for a continent-spanning web of travel. It might sound like a small thing, but it's a major breakthrough for the whole industry. The European side has big ambitions. They're sketching out a massive network that looks like a subway map stretched across an entire continent. The goal is a web of vacuum tubes spanning more than 15,000 miles and linking around 130 major cities. The idea is to make short airplane flights unnecessary. You could live in Berlin and work in Paris and travel from place to place quicker than dealing with a downtown rush hour. In Switzerland, they're testing something called the Infinite Loop, a circular track that works like a hamster wheel for the pod, letting engineers simulate long-distance travel without building a massive straight tube. India is also building its own test tubes with plans aimed at connecting large cities like Mumbai and Pune, and turning a miserable 3-hour drive into a 25-minute trip. It all sounds like the future is already here, but there's a reason we don't see hyperpooling pods around already. The engineering problems are huge. One of the biggest problems is the sun. When metal heats up, it expands, and over hundreds of miles, even sunlight can make a steel tube stretch. That's a serious issue when you're trying to keep a pod zooming through a perfectly aligned tube at super high speeds. Engineers basically have to create flexible sections that let the tube move without messing up the vacuum seal. And then there's safety. A Hyperloop tube is basically a spaceship stretched across the ground. Inside, there is almost no air. Outside, normal atmospheric pressure is constantly trying to find its way in. If the tube is damaged by an accident, a structural failure, or even debris, the air does not slowly leak inside. It explodes inward. That sudden rush creates a pressure wave that races down the tube and slams into everything in its path, including the pod itself. That's why Hyperloop safety has more in common with spacecraft engineering than traditional rail. Failure here is not gradual, it's instant. So who's more likely to win this battle in the near future? In the short term, the tunnel approach is more likely to win. It's still cars and tunnels, just faster. Even if the plan gets scaled back, parts of it can still be built and used, which makes it way more likely to show up first. Hyperloop is the opposite. The payoff is bigger, but it depends on multiple hard problems being solved at the same time. Perfect vacuum tubes, reliable switching, and safety systems that can handle worst-case failures. One weak link can shut the whole thing down, so it's harder to roll out quickly. Either one could change how we travel. Either way, the goal is simple: kill the commute. So what would you trust more, a deep tunnel carved through rock, or a vacuum tube above ground? Have you heard of Thacker Pass in Nevada? Probably not, but you should. There's something so valuable here that the US government invested around $2.26 billion to get it. No, it's not oil. That's a bit old-fashioned, huh? It's lithium, the lifeblood of electric vehicles, smartphones, and renewable energy storage. White gold, so to speak. And successfully mining it out from Thacker Pass could maybe reshuffle the global balance of power. But first of all, why here? Why Thacker Pass? Well, it sits on the edge of something called the McDermott Caldera. Millions of years ago, a supervolcano blew. The ground collapsed into a giant crater. Over time, water collected inside it, forming a shallow lake. Volcanic ash and rock from the surrounding cliffs slowly eroded into the lake bed, carrying with them all kinds of minerals, including lithium. As the lake dried up, those minerals stayed behind, building up thick layers of lithium-rich clay. And for decades, it just sat there, untouched. But now, With interest in electric vehicles being at an all-time high, this area in Nevada has suddenly become one of the most important pieces on the energy chessboard. Lithium ions are tiny, fast, really good at carrying electric charge inside a battery. Think of it like a game of ping pong happening in there. When you charge your phone or laptop, lithium ions zip from one side of the battery to the other. When you use your device, they bounce back the other way, creating the power that keeps your screen glowing. But the best part is that this process can go on for a very long time. Sometimes 15 years or even longer. That's why lithium is perfect for things we charge over and over, like smartphones, laptops, electric cars, and even huge power grids. Other metals? They're often heavier, slower, or wear out faster. Lithium's lightweight, fast-moving nature and incredible efficiency make it the go-to choice for our modern, always-on world. Right now, the world can't get enough lithium. Thanks to the electric vehicle boom and the global push for clean energy, demand is skyrocketing. In just the last year, global lithium use jumped by nearly 25%, and the curve is only going up. By 2030, demand could quadruple, and it's only going up from there. Electric vehicles are driving most of this. Around 85% of all lithium produced ends up in batteries, mostly for EVs. And with gas cars on the way out, every automaker is scrambling to lock in their lithium supply. But it's not just cars. We also need lithium for smartphones, laptops, smartwatches, tablets, power tools, drones, and backup power storage for homes and cities. No more stretching long cables over your yard as you mow your lawn. And let's not forget battery farms being built next to solar and wind farms. All of them rely on lithium to store excess energy when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing. So the problem is, we're going to need a lot more lithium than we're currently producing. But that's not the only issue. Even if a country has lithium in the ground, that doesn't mean it controls the battery supply chain. Mining is just the first step. Then, lithium has to be processed into battery-grade material. And right now, China dominates that stage, refining around 70% of the world's supply. When the US, Chile, or Australia digs it up, it often ends up in Chinese facilities before reaching a battery factory. That's a strategic weak spot. If global trade gets disrupted because of geopolitics, shipping, or any other reason, the whole clean energy transition slows down. It's kind of like growing our own coffee beans but needing someone else to roast and brew them. You're still dependent, just at a different point in the process. That's why the US isn't just after more lithium. It wants the entire process, from mining to battery production, to happen right here at home. And Thacker Pass could be a big piece of that puzzle. With a $2.6 billion loan from the federal government, this isn't just a mining site. It's a test run for bringing important energy operations back to the US. If it goes well, America won't just be catching up, it might be in the game at full speed. So, what makes Thacker Pass different from other lithium sources? One word: clay. Most lithium comes from hard rock mines in Australia or salty brine fields in South America. Those methods are well established. But here, lithium is locked in claystone, a mix of ancient volcanic ash compressed over millions of years. That kind of deposit is rare and much harder to process. Getting lithium out of clay usually means cooking it at super high temperatures or soaking it in acid baths, which is not exactly cheap or eco-friendly. But if Lithium Americas pulled it off, it could unlock a whole new type of lithium mining, not just here, but across the western US. Early estimates say Thacker Pass could hold up enough lithium to power millions of EVs for decades, possibly the largest deposit in North America. That's why this project matters. It's not just about getting lithium, it's about proving that clay-based extraction can work. If it does, it opens up a new domestic supply. If it doesn't work, the US stays stuck in the same loop. Dig up some lithium, but still send it overseas to get refined and stay dependent. On the other hand, if Thacker Pass reaches full production, it won't just change where America gets lithium, it might reshape the entire region. The mine is expected to run for 40 years and could become one of Nevada's largest industrial projects. That means jobs. Lots of them. Predictions say close to 2,000 people could be employed. Not to mention the ripple effect: housing, schools, roads, hospitals, and support services. Economists call this the multiplier effect. One mine means more local jobs: waiters, teachers, grocery clerks. The whole town gets a boost. In a rural area like Humboldt County, that's a big deal. And it doesn't stop there. Having a domestic supply means prices stay more stable, sourcing is more secure, and we can increase EV and battery production all over the country. What used to be just a hole in the ground is turning into a national treasure for energy, jobs, and independence. Still think this is just me overhyping it? Let's talk money. The US Department of Energy just ruled out one of its biggest clean energy loans ever, $2.26 billion to get Thacker Pass going. General Motors is investing $650 million to get early access to the lithium they need for their EVs, making this their biggest raw materials investment ever. Tesla has already set up a lithium refinery in Texas so they can cut out the middleman. Even ExxonMobil is getting in on the action, planning to start lithium production by 2027 and aiming to be a major US supplier by 2030. When oil giants, car manufacturers, and the government are all putting their money on the same bet, that's definitely more than just a trend. That's a real change. So what happens if this lithium boom hits a wall? It's possible. Lithium is a limited resource, but the future doesn't rely on fresh mining. Battery recycling is getting better fast. Some analyses even project that future recycling could recover up to 90% of lithium, and new tech is making it cheaper and cleaner to do so. In theory, someday your dead phone battery might power someone's new car, and there's new battery tech on the horizon. Solid-state sodium-ion and thermal batteries are all in development. They're not ready to take over just yet, but they're coming. So no, we're not facing a lithium apocalypse, but we are in a race to mine smarter, recycle better, and stay ahead of future shortages. For now, lithium still runs the show. Somewhere out there in the Nevada desert, there's a dusty construction site that might just shape the future. Not just of batteries, but of global energy, manufacturing, and independence. Thacker Pass isn't just about digging for metal. It's about shaking up the supply chain, giving the economy a boost, and stepping into the clean tech game. If everything goes smoothly, this chunk of land could power millions of cars and help energize the country too. We just have to wait and see. This area might just be the most important spot in America right now, as it is worth over $1 trillion. There's something incredibly valuable hidden right here at Thacker Pass, and it is going to shake things up, not just in Nevada, but in the US economy and its global relations. The McDermott Caldera is a massive area, about 28 miles long by 22 miles wide, stretching across northern Nevada and southern Oregon. It's in Humboldt County, a quiet, rural place with just one main city that's going to change a lot in the next 5 to 10 years. That's because they found white gold there. We're talking about lithium. And to explain why this metal is so important, we need a scale. On one side, we place a chunk of lithium, and on the other, an apple. What do you think will happen? If both have the same volume, the scale is going to tip toward the apple. That's because lithium is super light. Its density is about 0.3 ounces per cubic inch, which makes it the lightest solid you can find at room temperature. Lithium is also extremely reactive. That means it combines with other elements very easily, and it can catch fire just as easily. Mix it with water, fire. Expose it to air, yep, fire again. But when you combine its lightness with its high reactivity, you get a material that's perfect for batteries. Like the one powering your smartphone, laptop, or even your electric car. Nevada's been hiding this treasure for about 16 million years. The McDermott Caldera used to be a volcanic hotspot, spewing molten rock and creating a huge lake filled with mineral-rich waters. Over time, that lake dried up, leaving behind thick layers of clay loaded with lithium. Right now, Thacker Pass mine is sitting on one of the biggest untapped lithium reserves in the world, worth about $1.5 trillion. If everything goes as planned, they expect it to produce about 40,000 tons of high-quality lithium a year. And that's enough to make batteries for up to 800,000 electric cars. Like I mentioned earlier, this metal is the backbone of modern batteries. And with the world racing toward green energy, the demand for lithium is skyrocketing. Since 2020, its price has gone up more than 10 times, making it the most expensive battery metal in the world. That means it's way more expensive than magnesium, nickel, cobalt, and other materials used in rechargeable batteries. Right now, we're using about 1.16 million tons of lithium per year, and roughly 85% of it goes into making batteries, mostly for cars. Between 2030 and 2040, experts think we will need to double the money we're putting into production, from $94 billion to $188 billion. At the same time, investment in batteries will jump by over 200%, reaching $686 billion. Finally, by 2050, the demand for lithium is expected to be more than 10 times higher than what we're producing now. Sorry, I know that's a lot of numbers, but I just want to show how important Thacker Pass will be for the whole world. This mine is going to be key to keeping everything running. I mean, literally, since most of the future demand will be for things like cars, electric bikes, scooters, and renewable energy storage. Nevada could also be the epicenter of a global energy revolution, with the US aiming to cut pollution by 50% by 2030. A big part of that is replacing gas-powered vehicles with electric ones. And to make that happen, America is going to need a whole lot more lithium than it's producing right now. Nowadays, most of the metal used in the United States come from countries like Chile and Argentina. So if America wants to be a leader in this market, it really needs to invest more and more in projects like Thacker Pass. But there's another challenge. Finding lithium in a mine is one thing, but refining it is another story. Just like diamonds are carefully cut and shaped to bring out their sparkle and sold in rings and necklaces, something similar needs to be done with lithium. The raw material that comes from the mines has to be refined into a pure form that can actually be used in things like batteries. And China pretty much dominates this part of the market, and they're responsible for about 75% of global lithium-ion battery production. In other words, it doesn't matter if a country finds this powerful metal on its land, it will probably still need China to help refine it. So, the US is eager to strengthen its supply chain. In fact, they're so excited about this possibility that authorities have invested over $2 billion in loans into the Nevada project. Because of that, Thacker Pass could make the US a leader in lithium production worldwide. If their estimates are right, the McDermott caldera could hold nearly half of the world's known lithium reserves. It would almost double the reserves found in Bolivia's salt flats, for example, which used to hold the record for the world's largest deposit. This discovery is about to change Humboldt County for good. Those quiet streets surrounded by nature will never feel the same again. The mine will need about 2,000 workers, who will probably move there from other cities. Those workers will need houses, hospitals, schools for their kids, and all the necessary services. Do you see how it's like a ripple effect? For every person hired to work on the project during construction, 6 more people will get hired in the state to support them. Thacker Pass is also going to have a huge impact on the economy, not just in Nevada, but all across the country. People expect the mine to be active for 35 years, and each year it's expected to generate over $2 billion. But here's the thing. In Thacker Pass, they'll be extracting lithium from clay, and this process has never been done on such a huge scale before. So it's kind of a hit or miss. But if it works, it could completely change the industry. Big question. Who's interested in all this? Well, we've got 3 big companies eyeing the lithium market in the US. First, there's ExxonMobil. The oil giant wants to start producing lithium by 2027, and they have plans to become the top supplier for electric vehicles by 2030. Then there's General Motors, the company behind big car brands like Chevrolet and Cadillac. They're so interested in this business that they agreed to pay $625 million for a 38% stake in Thacker Pass. And finally, Tesla. In 2023, they started building a factory in Texas to process lithium. It's all part of their plan to handle more of their supply chain themselves. Now that you know how important lithium is, you might be wondering, what if we run out? Well, that could happen, since it comes from mining and, just like gold, is a finite resource. But that doesn't mean we'd have to give up smartphones or electric cars. If we ever run out of this metal, we'd probably find new ways to produce batteries. In fact, some experts think thermal batteries could be the next big thing. They store extra energy from renewable resources like wind or solar power, which are very cheap. So they represent a new way of storing energy at a small fraction of the cost. Nowadays, they're primarily used for powering the production of steel, cement, and chemicals. Thermal batteries are also being used to heat and cool large buildings. However, more and more projects are focusing on bringing this technology into private spaces, like houses and apartments. Experts are optimistic that initiatives like these could make thermal batteries as well known as electric batteries, and they might soon become a regular part of our daily lives.
You are looking at a remarkable idea, for this is the story of the miracle seed.
This massive lake in California is worth $540 billion, as it holds enough lithium to power over 30 trillion iPhones. That's way more than experts predicted, making it one of the biggest lithium reserves ever. This finding could revolutionize the US economy, but a major challenge is still standing in the way. If it's not solved, all that money will stay buried forever. First things first, lithium. This metal is so valuable that people call it white gold, and it's unbelievably light. In fact, it's the lightest solid on Earth at room temperature. It was discovered by a Swedish chemist in 1817, and honestly, since then, we didn't really care much about lithium. This poor metal was ignored for centuries because it didn't seem to have any practical use in everyday life. I mean, sure, it's light, it's white, it's shiny. But what could we actually do with it? At some point, though, another trait of this metal started to stand out. Its reactivity. Basically, it bonds really easily with other elements. But that also means something else. It can catch fire in seconds. For example, if you expose it to air, it goes through a wild oxidization reaction, and before you know it, boom! Flames everywhere. This might sound like danger to you, but to scientists, it screamed Eureka! Because being super light and super reactive actually makes it the perfect material for batteries. And you get why that's a big deal nowadays, right? Batteries power almost everything around us, like smartphones, cars, and even small airplanes. Since everyone suddenly wants lithium, demand has skyrocketed, and it's not slowing down anytime soon. Back in 2021, for example, the world produced about 540,000 tons of it. But by 2030, predictions say demand could soar past 3 million tons. And here's the problem. Lithium is a finite resource. There are only about 100 lithium mines in the world, mostly in Australia, Chile, and China. Sure, supply is expected to grow, but demand is climbing much faster. That means we could be facing a shortage soon. Lithium mines can keep up with today's demand, but they won't be able to do that for many more years. So that's why finding new lithium reserves today is basically like winning the lottery. In this case, the United States is one of the lucky winners. First, there's the Thacker Pass mine. This spot in Nevada might hold the largest untapped lithium reserves on the planet. To put it in perspective, some estimates say it could supply up to 1/4 of the world's lithium demand. We're talking as much as 40 million tons of this precious metal, and that might be worth over $500 billion. Right there, they'll be extracting lithium from clay. This might be challenging, since this process has never been done on such a huge scale before, but it's doable. A couple of years ago, the United States found another big win in the lithium game. The Salton Sea. This is a huge, shallow lake located in Southern California's Imperial County. At first, they announced that this spot could hold over 3.4 million tons of lithium underground. That would be enough to make more than 375 million batteries for electric vehicles. That was already huge. But then, more recently, specialists realized they had made a mistake. Actually, a good mistake. The amount of lithium there is likely much, much higher. It could hold 18 million tons of it. Now, the Salton Sea is being considered the 5th largest lithium deposit in the world. This could be a real game changer. The United States is betting big on this mineral, hoping it'll help keep the country's economy strong for decades to come. So, finding this second big source of lithium was a huge relief. It means America is one step closer to relying less on other countries. And, by the way, most of its lithium right now comes from Chile.
We refer to as the Saudi Arabia of lithium.
Of course, California is thrilled about this, seeing it as a potential economic windfall. The region is already being called the Saudi Arabia of lithium, or Lithium Valley, because of its potential to dominate the battery supply chain. And if it works out, it'll be a huge benefit for the state. Apparently, authorities plan to use 80% of the money from lithium extraction for local development and infrastructure. The idea is to upgrade roads, schools, and other public services. That could create a lot of new jobs for Imperial County, which is considered one of California's poorest regions. Big question: if the lithium is hiding under the lake, can they even get it out? Well, yes, at least in theory. There are two main ways companies usually extract lithium. The first is the old-school method, open pit mining, where the rock is dug up, crushed, and processed. That's what they do at Thacker Pass, for example. They use massive hydraulic shovels to dig the metal out of the clay. Then there are evaporation ponds. Here, they pump lithium-rich brine to the surface and let the water evaporate, leaving the metal behind. The problem with both methods is that they use tons of water and can cause a lot of contamination and waste. At the Salton Sea in California, things work a little differently. Instead of giant pits or evaporation ponds, companies are using the area's natural geothermal power to pull it out in a cleaner way. This method is called direct lithium extraction. And here's how it works. Near the lake, there are already 11 geothermal power plants that pump up super hot mineral-rich brine from underground. Normally, that brine is just used to make steam, which spins turbines to generate electricity. But now, companies are figuring out how to pull the lithium out of that same brine before sending it back underground. Since they're already pumping the brine for energy, collecting the lithium doesn't need any extra digging or big ponds. So it avoids most of the water waste and pollution you get with old methods. It's like getting clean energy and battery materials at the same time, but with way less impact on the environment. This method sounds brilliant and totally doable, but it also comes with challenges that won't be easy to overcome. Sure, people call it environmentally friendly, but that's only when you compare it to other ways of getting lithium. This method still raises concerns about water use. People in California are already dealing with shortages, and large-scale lithium extraction could put even more pressure on the region's limited water supply. The Salton Sea itself is shrinking fast. Water levels have dropped by more than 9 feet over the past 25 years. That creates a huge problem. Less water means more exposed lakebed. And the sediments there can contain harmful materials. As the lake shrinks, that exposed lakebed dries out and turns to dust, and that dust doesn't just sit there. The wind picks it up and blows it into the air. Now, the Salton Sea's shrinking shoreline is releasing toxic dust into the air. And that dust has been linked to increasing rates of respiratory problems among local residents. Authorities are already taking steps to reverse the situation by adding water to the dry parts of the Salton Sea. They're filling shallow ponds near the lake to make new wetlands. Their goal is to create a safe habitat for fish and birds, and to help keep that toxic dust under control. Some people worry that digging up all this white gold could make the Salton Sea shrink even faster and undo years of restoration work. For now, studies show geothermal plants only use about 4% of the region's water supply. But researchers still don't know if expanding these operations could end up making the water problem worse. So, what happens next? It's too soon to say, but one thing's for sure, we will need a lot more research to understand what this all means, not just for the Salton Sea, but for the future of the US economy.
The LaLaurie Mansion, located in the French Quarter of New Orleans, has a grim reputation. Its former owner, Madame Delphine McCarthy LaLaurie, was a wealthy socialite in the early 19th century. The urban legend says that she treated her workers very badly. One night on April 10, 1834, Madame LaLaurie's house began to burn. Madame and her family managed to escape, but she abandoned her workers. They were locked inside the house. The locals, outraged by her negligence, gathered around the house, broke some of its walls, and eventually stole the remaining possessions. After the fire, the LaLaurie family escaped to Paris. Another private mansion was built on this Louisiana land. But it's said that the ghosts of those workers are still trapped inside the property. They tend to bother living people demanding justice. Today, the house is private, but you can book a tour and hear this story in detail. By the way, the mansion and its notorious owner played a big part in the American Horror Story franchise, although they didn't actually film the series in that particular house. American actress and director Kathy Bates played Madame LaLaurie and showcased the quirky character of this famous woman. So you can check it out if you're not afraid. Our next creepy destination was also shown in a movie franchise, the Amityville Horror. The media says this Dutch colonial-style home is located in the village of Amityville in New York. George and Kathy Lutz bought this property in 1975 for $80,000. The low price was due to the tragedy that happened in the house 1 year before. One night, a young man named Ronnie DeFeo, who lived in the house, took the lives of all his family members. The Lutz family began to notice strange activities in the house, such as phantom odors, unreasonably low temperatures, and loud sounds of unknown origin. According to the Lutz family, one day they called a preacher to clear the grim vibes, but he felt very bad during the ritual and his hands started bleeding. The Lutzes fled the house in a rush. Their spooky story inspired the Amityville Horror, a book written by American author Jay Anson and several successful horror movies. Although the house was reconstructed, it still exists. However, its address has been changed to confuse the trail and prevent crowds of tourists from gathering around it. Do you recognize this seemingly cute house in Harrisville, Rhode Island? It's known as one of the most haunted houses in America. The property earned its notorious reputation after multiple people lost their lives in this house over the years. In 1970, the Perrons family began to live here, and according to the legend, an invisible being lived along with them. At first, the entity was playful, but then it started getting more sinister. The family members experienced physical attacks and unexplainable illnesses. They invited the famous mystery hunters, Ed and Lorraine Warren, to research this case, which later inspired a book and the movie The Conjuring, released in 2013. In 2019, the property was purchased by the Heisens family, who also investigated mysteries. They reported some weird stuff going on in the house too, and eventually developed a successful business on haunted tourism. They sold the property for nearly $1.5 million in 2022. Let's move on to Tennessee. The urban legend tells a creepy story that started in 1804. John Bell and his family moved to this peaceful-looking farm in North Carolina. At first, everything went well, but 13 years later, the family began to experience bone-chilling events. At first, they started seeing weird animal-like shadows around the farm. Soon, these mysterious guests began to whisper and eventually talk out loud. Some mysterious entity began to wake up the family at night with loud noises and attacks. It particularly bothered their young daughter, Betsy Bell. Invisible hands grabbed Betsy by the hair and hit her body. When she grew up and was about to get married, the entity did everything to break the engagement, saying that Betsy wouldn't be happy with her groom. Rumors about these scary events spread throughout the village, and the locals began to visit the farm, hoping to see it for themselves. They called the entity Bell Witch. Many years have passed, but the locals still believe that the phantom of the evil witch lives in these places and hides in a cave near the farm. Ohio is one of the most notoriously haunted states in the USA. One of its legendary spots is the Mansfield Reformatory, a former prison that supposedly hosts the country's most creepy entities. The prison is nearly 130 years old. It was closed in 1990 and soon gained fame, especially after becoming the filming location for The Shawshank Redemption. And since we're passing through Ohio, let's take a look at another spooky place. The Chippewa Lake Amusement Park used to attract many guests with its various rides, roller coasters, and iconic Ferris wheel. But in the 1970s, 100 years after opening, the park was forced to close. It happened due to poor maintenance and low attendance. The park has gone through multiple fires, so today it looks like a bunch of creepy ruins overgrown with shrubs and rust. Mark Twain had been living in this charismatic house in Hartford, Connecticut for about 17 years. In this period, he wrote both The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Today, this property serves as a museum that showcases the author's life. But it's also known for some mysterious phenomena. Multiple visitors reported hearing odd noises and seeing a phantom of a woman in white. The most haunted part of the house is the billiard room. Twain used to chill there a lot during his stay, and today, some visitors claim they can smell tobacco smoke as they pass through. Now, Pennsylvania has lots of terrifying tales to offer. Despite its chic appearance, this fancy mansion has been empty for a while now. Its owner, Peter Widener, finished the construction after losing his beloved wife, Hannah, during a tragic yacht trip. It happened at the end of the 19th century, and eventually, Widener lost multiple relatives in this house. He was wealthy enough to invest in the Titanic construction. Perhaps he was fascinated by the idea of an unsinkable ship. But unfortunately, both Peter's oldest son and grandson lost their lives when the Titanic sank. Eventually, the mansion was abandoned. But it's said that the phantoms of the Widener family are still there. And speaking of the Titanic, Molly Brown was one of the survivors. She got famous for rowing a lifeboat for about 7 hours before reaching a safe place. But Molly's own mansion in Denver gained a spooky reputation. She owned the haunted property together with her husband, who ran a mining business. Over the years, multiple people reported seeing phantoms of cats and human figures running down the staircase of the house. The witnesses of such visions insist that something spooky is definitely going on behind these walls. Today, the mansion operates as a museum, so you can go and see it for yourself. And how about meeting a creepy phantom while doing some casual shopping in Soho? The urban legend dates back to 1799. A young lady, Gulielma Elmore Sands, tried to escape with her lover, Levi Weeks. They were tenants in the same boarding house. Around 2 weeks later, her body was found at the bottom of a well in the building that today hosts a large retail store, COS. After the horrifying discovery, the police arrested Levi. Although he was acquitted, Sands' phantom is said to haunt the building as a warning to other ladies. The creepiest thing is that the well is still there, and shoppers can see it in the basement at the back of the men's department. Now, brace yourself and welcome to the famous haunted toy store in Sunnyvale, California. The legend says that the land under the property used to be a plantation owned by Martin Murphy. He hired a preacher, Johnny Johnson, who fell in love with Murphy's daughter, Elizabeth. But she got engaged to a lawyer. Johnny's heart was broken, and he lost his life in an accident while chopping wood. Today, Johnny's phantom reportedly wanders around the Toys R Us store, still chasing his beloved Elizabeth. Customers and employees report seeing objects moving on their own, hearing mysterious footsteps, and even Johnny's whispers over the intercom system. Ooh.
It's one of America's strangest contradictions. The Northeast the cradle of cities, commerce, and crowds, hides a vast, empty wilderness at its northern edge. Millions live packed together to the south, yet up here, there's space for everyone, and almost no one takes it. How did this happen? How did the heart of America's most crowded region end up with one of its loneliest frontiers? The northeastern United States is home to more than 50 million people. It's one of the busiest and most densely packed regions in all of America. But almost 90% of those people live in the southern half of it. If you go north, past big cities and highways, everything will change. The noise will fade and the lights will thin out. You'll find yourself in a different world. A quiet land of forests, lakes, and mountains, stretching across northern New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. This is America's empty Northeast. And the mystery is simple. Why is this part of one of the most crowded regions in the country so empty? First of all, let's take a look at New England itself. Massachusetts and Rhode Island are bursting at the seams, while Maine, Vermont, and New Hampshire feel wide open. Connecticut sits in the middle, literally and figuratively. Massachusetts is basically the crowd magnet. Most people live around Boston and the cities nearby, Cambridge, Worcester, Springfield, where everything's close, busy, and built up. Rhode Island may be tiny, but it's got a big city density. Connecticut sits right between Boston and New York, and it shows. It has a busy coastline and quieter inland towns. It's not too crowded and not too empty. The middle ground. Once you cross into New Hampshire, things slow down. There's Manchester and Nashua, but most of the state is forests, lakes, and open land. Then there's Vermont, easily the least crowded region of the bunch. The Green Mountains slice through the middle, and most people live in small towns or villages. And Maine is huge and mostly empty. Most people stick to the southern coast. If you head north, you'll hit endless forests, lakes, and long, quiet roads. It's beautiful, but it feels like the edge of the map. Today, the northern half of the Northeast, northern New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, holds only about 4.9 million people. That's roughly the same as the population of the Boston metro area alone. To put that in perspective, if you take southern New York and southern New England, about the same land area, you get 10 times as many people living there. So, why the gap? It all comes back to geography, history, and economics, and how they've always worked together to keep the North empty. Let's start with the land itself. The thing is, the farther north you go, the rougher the land gets. Southern New England and downstate New York are full of rolling hills, wide valleys, and coastal plains. But then come the mountains. They're old, crumbling, and wild. In northern New York, you'll see the Adirondacks. To their east, the Green Mountains run up the middle of Vermont, stretching into Quebec. Keep going and you hit the White Mountains of New Hampshire. They're home to Mount Washington, famous for some of the most severe weather on Earth. And beyond that, the western Maine Mountains roll on toward Canada. Those aren't gentle hills, they're real barriers, and they owe their shape to one of the most powerful forces in Earth's history: ice. During the last ice age, huge glaciers covered this land. When they finally retreated, they carved out deep valleys and left behind thin, rocky soil. Later, the basins filled with water, creating thousands of lakes and ponds. It's a beautiful but difficult land to live on. Farming never stood a chance here the way it did farther south, where the soil is way richer. So the mountains stayed wild, covered in dense forests that even today stretch for miles. Northern Maine and the Adirondacks together make up one of the largest continuous forests east of the Mississippi. For centuries, people have come here to cut timber, fish, or hunt, but never in great numbers. And then there's the weather. Up here, winters are long, dark, and cold. Snow piles up early and doesn't leave easily. Summers are short, and the growing season is barely long enough to farm. It's not exactly a place that says, "Come start a new life." But of course, Some people did. And here's where history comes into play. Long before Europeans arrived, this land was home to indigenous nations. The Abenaki, living across Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, had complex trade routes, connecting their communities all the way from modern Quebec to Massachusetts. Farther west, the powerful Iroquois Confederacy extended its influence toward the Adirondacks, controlling vast hunting grounds and trade routes. Then came the Europeans. In the 1600s, French explorers and fur traders pushed south from Quebec. They set up outposts along rivers and lakes that linked the region to Canada. They saw opportunity. Furs, fish, timber, but not farmland. The dense forests and harsh winters kept settlements small and scattered. The English, expanding north from the Massachusetts Bay Colony, took to the coast. They settled in southern Maine and New Hampshire, but going inland was another story. Between the cold, the forests, and the resistance from native nations, their progress was slow and dangerous. For more than a century, the interior of the northern Northeast stayed wild. Later, around the 1760s, the British took control of the region. Land speculators moved in, especially in Vermont, which both New York and New Hampshire claimed as their own. The overlapping claims led to chaos, and eventually, Vermont declared itself an independent republic in 1777. For 14 years, it existed on its own until it joined the United States in 1791 as the 14th state. New Hampshire pushed inland from the coast, building towns in the valleys between its granite mountains. Maine, meanwhile, spent centuries as parts of Massachusetts. Its economy ran on timber and shipbuilding. Trees turned into masts and planks for the growing British and later American navies. And in northern New York, the Adirondacks remained a wild frontier long after the rest of the state filled up. The land was too rugged and the winters too fierce. Logging, mining, and later tourism would bring people north, but never in huge numbers. By the mid-1800s, the southern parts of New England were booming. Cities were growing, factories were humming, and immigrants were arriving in large numbers. But the northern regions stayed quiet. So as we now know, the mountains are the first big barrier. They make everything harder: travel, building, farming, and surviving winter. The soil is thin, rocky, and poor. And what's underneath isn't much better. The region doesn't have rich mineral deposits or coal seams like the Appalachians farther south. Without valuable resources to mine or easy land to farm, there wasn't much reason for settlers to stay. That was one of the reasons why the economy never took off. The empty Northeast never became a center of industry. Southern New England had rivers that powered early factories, ports connected it to global trade, and the cities attracted millions of immigrants. Northern New England and northern New York had none of that. They had lumber, granite, and paper mills, all useful, but those industries didn't create huge cities. Even today, the economy up there relies on the same resources, along with tourism. People come to hike, ski, fish, and escape city life, but most don't stay year-round. Towns fill up in summer and fall, then empty out when the snow starts falling. A few small cities, Portland, Burlington, Manchester, thrive, but there's no Boston or New York up here. You won't find massive universities, corporate headquarters, or international airports to pull in young people and families. In fact, some states have gone so far as to pay people to move there. Maine and Vermont have both launched programs offering money to remote workers who relocate. That's a pretty desperate attempt to reverse decades of population decline. Today, this empty Northeast holds just about 1% of America's population. It's a land of deep woods, icy lakes, and quiet towns. The wilderness never really left this region, but that stillness is also what makes this place so special. The rest of the Northeast is filled with constant noise and motion. Meanwhile, the North is a reminder of what the region once was: wild, cold, and untamed. That's how the heart of America's most crowded region remains one of its last true frontiers. People living in Hawaii need to make at least twice the average salary in the rest of the US to live comfortably. Those who aren't ready to pay $5 for a gallon of milk have to look for happiness elsewhere. And year after year, the state makes it to the top lines of the population loss rating. While the local middle class is leaving, Hawaii is turning into a heaven for billionaires. Just 37 of them already own 11% of all the private land in the Aloha State. Larry Ellison, co-founder of the Oracle Corporation, bought 98% of the island of Lanai, including the grocery store, the only gas station, and the community newspaper, all for a nifty sum of $300 million. This makes him the boss and landlord of everyone on the island. Mark Zuckerberg, the Meta founder and CEO, is building a huge compound on Kauai with more than a dozen buildings, at least 30 bedrooms and bathrooms, a tunnel leading to a 5,000 square feet underground bunker, and 11 tree houses connected by intricate rope bridges. The local residents with ancestral rights to this land lost in court and had to put it up for auction. The Malaysian tycoon Kvek Leng Khan owns a third of the island of Molokai through his business empire. Of course, these and some of the world's richest people create new jobs and invest in development projects on the islands. But still, nearly 2/3 of the locals believe that their state is being run for tourists at the expense of the residents. A lot of famous people like to live in Wailea and Makina in Maui because it's peaceful and gives them the privacy they want. Oprah Winfrey has a big house up in the local hills. Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, reportedly bought a huge house by La Perouse Bay for $78 million. Other famous people who live in Maui include Clint Eastwood, Mick Fleetwood, Jim Carrey, and Alice Cooper. When you visit Maui, you can see a special Hall of Fame display at the airport showing those celebrities. It's supposed to celebrate their ties with the island, but the local people feel like it only highlights the huge gap between the new super wealthy residents and the local people who can barely afford to live there. As the rich and famous keep buying property across Hawaii, home prices continue to rise. It's more expensive to buy a house here than in Washington, D.C. or California. Part of the reason for such high pricing is how the land itself is formed. Hawaii is bigger than most people think, but it's made up of lots of separate islands that are spread far apart. Even though the islands are big, not all of the land can be used to build houses or neighborhoods. Unlike most of the US, which has a lot of flat land and gentle hills, much of Hawaii is made up of steep, rocky mountains and rough terrain. This kind of land is very hard to build on or live on. Because of this, most of the people on Hawaii, about 1 million of them, live on the island called Oahu. The other islands, like the Big Island, have far fewer people. There isn't enough land for everyone, and that makes it hard for people who have lived in Hawaii their whole lives to afford a place to live. Tourism makes up 21% of the state's economy. Most of the visitors come from the United States and Japan. Tourists bring in tons of money, but there's a problem. Depending too much on tourism can be risky for Hawaii. In the recent years, because of we all know what happened, a health rule called the Conditional Sail Order stopped cruise ships from coming to Hawaii for health safety reasons. Many other tourist activities, like visiting beaches or attending events, were also shut down. With fewer visitors, Hawaii earned a lot less money, which hurt the economy. To avoid this problem in the future, Hawaii has been trying to make money in other ways besides tourism. One idea is to invest more in fishing, but this hasn't been easy. At some point, there was too much fishing going on here, and now Hawaii has to bring in 63% of its seafood from other places instead of catching it nearby. There are farms here that grow pineapples, macadamia nuts, coffee, and produce milk. But now, farming isn't as important as it was 100 years ago. Probably one of the reasons is that it's more profitable to sell the land for houses or hotels than to use it for farming. This change made Hawaii even more dependent on tourism and made living in the Aloha State so very pricey. Honolulu is reported to be the 7th most expensive city to live in the U.S. A family of 4 spends around $8,000 a month here, and a single adult will have to pay, on average, $2,500. Food alone costs around $500 a person for 1 month. Most of the food in Hawaii, about 85 to 90%, comes from faraway places. Since it has to travel more than 2,500 miles to get there, around 1/3 of all the food spoils along the way, especially because Hawaii is warm and humid. This waste makes things more expensive because stores know they'll lose some of their products and charge more to cover their losses. There aren't as many stores competing with each other. If stores don't compete, they have no reason to lower their prices. On top of that, they have to pay a lot for things like rent and electricity, so they raise their prices to make up for those costs. Speaking of electricity, an average bill is around $200, which is almost 90% higher than the national average. Yep, the Aloha State has the highest energy costs in the country. And perhaps that's why people in Hawaii use the least amount of electricity compared to other states. But their bills are still much higher. The main reason is the price per unit of electricity, called a kilowatt hour. 1 unit of electricity costs almost 40 cents. To compare, Utah has the cheapest rate at just 10.91 cents. It's so expensive in Hawaii because most of the electricity comes from oil, and that oil has to be shipped to the islands. Since Hawaii depends so much on oil, energy costs go up and down with oil prices. On top of all that, the income tax is some of the highest in the country. A quarter of all households in Hawaii spent more than their income in 2024. To survive, people used savings and credit cards and cut expenses. They also had to work more hours or get an extra job. They were forced to sell their belongings and borrow money from relatives, banks, or other lenders. Almost half of residents are in the category called ALICE, and it has nothing to do with Alice in Wonderland. It means asset limited, income constrained, employed. More than 1 in 3 residents lives below the ALICE annual income threshold. And then there's also legislation that further complicates things for Hawaii. It says that any goods shipped between places in the U.S. must be carried on ships that are owned, built, and run by Americans. This makes shipping much more expensive because U.S. ships and crews cost a lot more than ships from other countries. Most of the world's ships don't follow these rules because they're registered in countries like Panama. Because of this, Hawaii can still get goods from places like East Asia using cheaper ships, but if they want something from the mainland US, it costs way more money. In fact, this law costs Hawaii over $1 billion every year. This law also makes it really hard for Hawaii to grow businesses because everything is so expensive. The cost of insurance is also going up. This is because the islands are hit by natural disasters like hurricanes and storms more often now. All of this adds up to making life in Hawaii even more expensive. But even despite all that, the state steadily lands high in studies on well-being. Even people who can barely afford a living are mostly happier, or at least less unhappy in Hawaii than in other states. I guess the strong community support, a clean and fantastically beautiful environment, and the ability to have beach parties all year round make up for many hardships. The American dream used to sound simple. Work hard, buy a house, build a life. But today, that dream can just as easily sink you. A home isn't a guaranteed asset anymore. It's a long-term, high-risk expense. And the belief that owning one will automatically make you happier, that's nostalgia more than reality. Yet millions of us still chase it. New data shows the average American family could afford only about 15% of homes on the market in 2023, the lowest level ever recorded. And here's the twist. Most Americans still dream of owning a home, yet more than 60% don't think they'll ever get one. A growing number say that no matter how hard they work, a home they actually want is drifting out of reach. Here's the part nobody likes to say out loud. Boomers bought homes when prices were just 2 or 3 times their annual income. And even then, it felt like a big milestone. For Gen Z, that same milestone looks like a locked door. What used to be a symbol of success has quietly turned into a financial trap. Take Jordan. He spent years renting the same cramped apartment, telling himself he just needed a little more time to save. But every time he managed to tuck away a few $100s, life demanded it back. Rent went up, groceries went up, gas went up. Everything crept higher, except Jordan's paycheck. Meanwhile, home prices were sprinting ahead and mortgage rates were climbing right behind them. Every listing Jordan clicked on felt like a reminder. The dream was moving faster than he could chase it. And after a while, it didn't just feel discouraging, it felt impossible. That's when the frustration sets in, the burnout, the quiet realization that the American dream you were promised might not be meant for you at all. Mortgages were designed for a world that barely exists anymore. A 20th century economy where people stayed in the same job for decades, interest rates were gentle, and the population kept expanding. Back then, buying a home felt like a stable, predictable life step. But after the 2008 crash, and especially after 2020, the ground shifted. Wages stopped keeping up, interest rates spiked, housing supply collapsed. And yet the mortgage system, it stayed frozen in time, like it didn't get the memo. What used to be a safe bet slowly morphed into one of the riskiest financial contracts most people will ever sign. People still feel pressured to do it, even if they can barely make the math work. And here's the wild part. Even with record high prices, millions of Americans are still hanging on to that dream. But for the people who did manage to buy, the dream doesn't always look dreamy up close. A new survey shows nearly 7 out of 10 homeowners actually regret buying their home because the financial stress is so much heavier than they expected. All the surprise costs, repairs, taxes, insurance stack up fast, almost aggressively. A study from Clever Real Estate breaks it down. In 2025, owning a home isn't just expensive, it's shockingly expensive. Beyond the mortgage, the average homeowner is shelling out about $24,500 a year. That's more than $2,000 every single month just for utilities, maintenance, repairs, property taxes, insurance. The part nobody puts on the real estate brochure. And utilities alone are the biggest hit right after the mortgage itself. And if you live in a homeowners association, the complications don't stop there. It gets even worse. HOA owners pay roughly $3,000 more every year, pushing their total annual costs to nearly $28,000. $28,000 just to keep a roof over their head. The most unsettling part? Almost nobody saw it coming. More than 8 out of 10 homeowners say the real costs blindsided them. Like they signed up for one life and woke up in another. And nearly half now admit something they never thought they'd say out loud. Renting might actually be the easier path. A real investment pays you back. Your house doesn't do that. In the end, owning a home ends up costing way more than just the price you bought it for. When you look at how much you really spend over the years, any profit you could potentially make from selling it can disappear fast. Let's figure out why. The first years of a mortgage are brutal. Most of your payment disappears into interest, not the home itself. And that money? Gone forever. Add in closing costs, agent fees, and other charges, and you can lose almost 10% of a home's value just buying or selling it. Then come the repairs, the maintenance, the surprise breakdowns. Homeowners often spend 1 to 4% of their home's value every year just keeping it livable. And property taxes and insurance never stop climbing. Take Jess. She thought buying a home in 2019 was the smart move. A cozy 3-bedroom in the suburbs, a manageable mortgage, a sense of pride. But reality hit fast. Taxes went up, insurance went up, the roof leaked, the HVAC got broken. Even routine maintenance cost more than she ever budgeted for. Utilities and HOA fees piled on top. Before long, Jess felt her house draining her bank account faster than she could refill it. Some days, she wishes she'd rented a little longer or saved a lot more. Because when the costs rise faster than your income, owning a home stops being a dream and starts feeling like a trap. This hits millennials the hardest. Some of them only recently bought their first home, just in time for the costs to spiral. Nearly 1 in 4 millennial homeowners say the financial strain is so intense they actually wish they could go back to renting. That's more than double the share of boomers who feel the same. And Gen X? They're struggling too. About 25% say they'd undo their purchase if they could. Now, how about we move on to a different financial matter familiar to literally everyone? Yep, I'm talking about credit cards. In the United States, a single number, your credit score, can define a person's financial life. It affects the ability to rent an apartment, buy a house, take out a car loan, or even qualify for basic services. Many Americans can be approved for huge loans, like $1 million mortgage, while still struggling to pay for daily expenses. The thing is, credit cards are introduced to young Americans very early, often in college. Banks encourage students to get cards with small limits to start building a credit history. But most schools don't teach students how to manage credit, interest rates, or debt responsibly. That's why many Americans view credit as extra money, not borrowed money. This leads to overspending and long-term debt. The idea is buy now, pay later. Student loans and high housing costs normalize debt from an early age, and it becomes common for people to borrow money, not only for necessities, but also for luxury items. Curiously, the whole situation is very different for Europe. Credit is generally used only for planned expenses. For everyday spending, people mostly use cash or debit cards. College is free or way cheaper than in the US in most countries, so young adults usually start out without big student loans. Banks don't push credit cards on students, and the culture encourages saving, planning ahead, and avoiding risky money habits. Credit is just a tool, not a must. People can live comfortably without taking on high-interest loans or always borrowing money. Now, another curious thing we rarely think about is how the financial situation impacts young adults' love lives. People have always seen marriage as a big milestone, a sign of stability and commitment. But Gen Z, born around 1997 to 2012, has it tough when it comes to marriage. They're trapped. Student loans, sky-high rent, and the cost of living make tying the knot feel more like a burden than a celebration. Buying a house, raising a family, and keeping up a lifestyle all feel scary when money isn't steady. So unlike older generations who often married young and built wealth together, Gen Z sees marriage as a big financial risk. 1,497. That's the number of valid credit cards that belong to one person. He holds the record for the most active credit cards in the United States. All of them are real and usable. He got into this wild journey in the 1960s because of a bet with a friend, and eventually became Mr. Plastic Fantastic. His record is a good warning sign for holders of over 631 million active credit cards floating around the US as of 2025. That's 2.4 cards per adult. The average card balance is $6,523, and the national credit card debt, get ready for it, is $1.23 trillion. Millions of Americans walking around with 3, 4, even 5 credit cards isn't some quirky habit. It's standard. It's even expected. And that's not because people love plastic, but because the financial system basically trained everyone to think that living on credit equals playing smart. You get better mortgage rates if your credit score is high. You get cash back on groceries, you get travel upgrades, you get 0% intro offers, sign-up bonuses, reward multipliers, points on points on points. And that story starts much earlier than you might think. Back in the 18th century, even before the country became a country, there was barely any actual cash lying around. People bought things on account, borrowing until the next harvest or the next shipment. Then, the 19th century showed up and America moved from farms to factories. Now, people suddenly had something brand new: predictable paychecks. And businesses jumped on that immediately. Installment credit was born. A tiny down payment up front, then weekly or monthly payments after that. For the first time, expensive stuff became accessible to ordinary people. Not because they had money now, but because they'd have money later. Big city department stores were busy reinventing another kind of borrowing: the charge account. If you were well off enough, the store gave you a personal line of credit, and you just paid the balance every month with 0 interest. Stores didn't just let you borrow, they turned it into a status symbol. They introduced charge tokens and later these metal charge plates, basically old school credit cards. They had your account info stamped right into them. In the 20th century, after the Great Depression flattened the economy, the authorities realized that without easy access to credit, the American machine would stall again. That's when buy now, pay later became a national philosophy. In the 1950s, Diners Club launched the first universal card. Then came Bank AmeriCard, which eventually turned into Visa. And these things spread fast. They weren't just convenient, they felt cool, modern, and sophisticated. Suddenly, you could walk into a restaurant, pay with a little rectangle, and walk out looking like you owned half the city. You know that feeling, right? Anyway, banks mailed out millions of credit cards with barely any idea who was receiving them. Imagine you open your mailbox and find a card just sitting there. I have to admit, I wouldn't turn down that free credit. By the 1970s, Visa and MasterCard built nationwide networks. By the 1980s, and this part still blows my mind, banks moved operations to states with no interest rate caps. Rewards programs came next. Points, miles, cashback, like the chocolate sprinkles on the financial sundae. And after decades of this, credit cards didn't just become a tool, they became a lifestyle strategy. Today, most of us don't even view credit cards as debt. It's more of a leverage, a way to live smoothly. On average, a boomer has 4 to 5 credit cards today. Millennials, around 3.5. Gen Z is already at 2.2 and climbing, even though half of them still look like they're 15 years old. Let's get personal. I remember opening my first card because of the sign-up bonus, the free airfare. I didn't think about APR or utilization or minimum payments. I thought about seeing the ocean for the first time. But the moment that first interest charge showed up, something clicked. This isn't free money. This is a system. And I just stepped into it, just like millions do every year. It made me think. Just because everyone else treats 3 or 4 cards as normal doesn't mean you're safe without rules. Culture normalized it, but that doesn't wipe out the risk. I know people who have one card for everyday essentials, another for emergency or travels, and another one for the big purchases. And then there's a fourth one, which just sits in a drawer but stays open because closing it lowers your credit score. Different cards are basically like different superpowers. One turns every purchase into frequent flyer miles. Another throws cash back at you like it's confetti. And a third hands out gift cards or free gas like some weird financial carnival prize. A lot of these programs quietly cap how many rewards you can earn. So if you want to squeeze every last drop out of your spending, having a few different rewards cards means you never leave points on the table. Banks are just happy about all of this as they make money from interest, fees, and card usage. Their marketing convinces you that rewards equal freedom. You know, that feel-good moment like, look at my platinum card, travel perks. But the math behind that perk comes from others who didn't pay off balances. It's all connected. The system created for convenience became a growth business. and you and I and millions of others are part of the engine. There's this guy who earns around 60 grand a year who ended up carrying about $45,000 in card debt, with almost half of it already tossed into collections. Every single card he has is maxed out. It's the kind of situation where you can practically feel the walls closing in, even though on paper he should be doing fine. It feels like watching someone run on a treadmill that keeps speeding up while everyone yells, "Just keep your balance," from the sidelines. And using credit cards doesn't have to do with lower income. Actually, higher income households earning over $100,000 use cards at a 95% rate. It's even kind of logical. More income means more access, which leads to more cards. But more access also means more temptation. I'm not saying credit cards are all evil. They are powerful. When you use them responsibly, I mean. Pay off balances, keep utilization low, diversify cards for real benefits. They can serve you. But letting them control you? That's where things go sideways. Because the same tools that build credit can also bury it. When I missed a payment due to something else, because yeah, life happens, I realized I had fewer cushions than I thought. Credit isn't a guarantee. It's a responsibility. If you woke up tomorrow without your cards, no rewards, no bonuses, no backup lines, would you still be fine? Would you pay off what you owe? Would you handle emergencies without borrowing more? That's not the questions banks want you to ask. They want you to open and borrow more and more. America isn't a place where people accidentally fall into credit culture. It's a place where the system teaches you how to use it. Like it or not, this is the financial environment almost everyone grows up in. And when I look at all of this, the history, the psychology, the marketing, the incentives, I feel like the entire story of credit cards in America isn't really about money at all. It's about identity, status, trust, and the dream of getting ahead. Credit cards let people buy present comfort with future earnings. They make every dream, new furniture, a 5-star vacation, a fancy laptop, a luxurious car, just one swipe closer. Whether that's empowering or dangerous depends on who you ask. But one thing is certain, the US isn't just the land of opportunity. It's the land of credit, where having 3 credit cards isn't a sign of debt. It's a sign of financial literacy.
So stargazers were chasing the Perseid meteor shower, but instead, they got something more unusual and rare, a massive cosmic swirl in the sky. In August 2025, reports poured in from Maryland, New York, New Jersey, Illinois, Ohio, Nebraska, a total of at least 10 states, and Ontario, Canada. The ghostly spiral was floating over the highways, houses, and woods for almost 10 minutes before vanishing like a Penn and Teller trick. It bloomed, unfurled, and then just faded. The internet went nuts about the mysterious spiral. Witnesses snapped video with shaky hands, wondering what they just saw. And of course, theories bloom faster than wildflowers in spring. Some people thought it must have been a Perseid meteor. It all happened smack in the middle of the season for those shooting stars. But meteors blaze bright and fast, and this was slow, hypnotic, and weirdly beautiful. Then a rocket theory took hold. The United Launch Alliance's Vulcan from Florida was a prime suspect. But the geometry didn't add up, as that rocket headed east, not the Midwest. The timing and path just didn't align. Finally, the European dark horse entered the spotlight, Ariane 6. They launched this rocket with a weather satellite on it from French Guiana just minutes earlier. Some astronomers mentioned that it probably released frozen exhaust high in the atmosphere during its cleanup phase. That spinning fuel cloud could have caught the sunlight just right, creating a spiral that drifted in the upper atmosphere. People were able to see it for a good stretch before dissipation. What we do know is that the physics behind what we witnessed are normally part of the twilight phenomenon. As the upper stage of a rocket starts spinning in space, it dumps leftover fuel. In the upper atmosphere, that fuel instantly turns into ice crystals that scatter sunlight and form a spiral that looks like something spun straight out of a fantasy novel. It's totally natural. and doesn't have to do with extraterrestrial civilizations like some people thought. Still, nothing's confirmed, but there are more similar glowing structures lately, mostly from SpaceX's Falcon 9 rockets. That's why they even have a nickname, SpaceX Spirals. In March 2025, a glowing swirl formed above Europe like a neon whirlpool, or the Milky Way got into a blender. The blue spiral stretched and spun steadily for about 8 to 12 minutes above the UK and further into Sweden, Poland, Hungary, and Croatia. The sponsor of this sky show was a Falcon 9 rocket that had launched from Cape Canaveral earlier that day. Once the rocket reached space, it dumped leftover fuel that froze into ice crystals, and people got to enjoy an amazing sight. Now, normally, SpaceX spirals come in a perfect vortex shape, but the one that appeared over Europe in 2024 had two faint, horn-like pillars of light. It's the only horn spiral we've seen so far. It photobombed the auroras over countries like Poland, Lithuania, and the Czech Republic. Earlier that evening, a Falcon 9 rocket launched from California's Vandenberg Air Force Base, carrying Earth-observing satellites. Another layer to the story is that there was a strong G3-level geomagnetic storm happening at the same time, thanks to a coronal mass ejection that crashed into Earth's magnetic field earlier that day. That storm pumped up the northern lights, which became the stage backdrop for the spiral's eerie entrance. Another SpaceX spiral example is from April 2023. Over Alaska, people who went out to watch the northern lights suddenly froze as a glowing blue spiral swirled into view. It was drifting across skies like someone had opened a portal to another dimension. Cameras caught it, social media went wild, and Stargate in the sky was suddenly trending. But as it turned out, the portal was no invitation from the Milky Way, but the aftermath of a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. Frozen exhaust spun in the upper atmosphere and reflected sunlight in a perfect corkscrew pattern, framed against shimmering auroras. The science was straightforward, but the sight was straight out of a science fiction film. Now, spirals aren't the only kind of weird atmospheric shows nature throws for us. In Italy in 2023, a massive red ring of light suddenly flashed high above a storm. Scientists identified it as an ELF, a type of transient luminous event. When a lightning bolt unleashes a powerful electromagnetic pulse, it slams into the ionosphere's nitrogen and creates a glowing red disk hundreds of miles across. The phenomenon lasted only milliseconds, but thanks to time-lapse cameras, it burned into memory like the outline of an extraterrestrial saucer. Normally, only satellites orbiting the Earth can spot ELVs, but in this case, the lightning bolt was at least 10 times more powerful than regular ones, so it was visible to humans on Earth. Another cool thing about it is that it looked like it was hanging in the sky, directly above the town of Posigno. But in reality, the massive halo appeared above central Italy and part of the Adriatic Sea. It was just a forced perspective that made it look like it was in a completely different space. You can only get the best view of some sky shows directly from space. Aboard the International Space Station, orbiting 250 miles above Earth, astronauts once reported seeing two mysterious blue blobs glowing beneath them. From orbit, they looked like deep-sea creatures that had been misplaced in the sky, two radiant orbs pulsing against the blackness of space. It turned out that one blob was a massive lightning strike somewhere in the Gulf of Thailand. You can't normally spot those from the ISS, as clouds hide them. But this one strike occurred next to a large circular gap in the top of the clouds, and the lightning illuminated the surrounding walls of the cloudy caldera-like structure. The second glowing blue blob was the Moon playing tricks with light. Because of where the Moon was lined up with the International Space Station, the sunlight it reflected had to pass through Earth's atmosphere before reaching the astronauts' cameras. And when light hit the atmosphere, things got funky. Tiny particles floating in our air, like dust, water, and other stuff, scattered light in different ways. Not all colors of light behave the same, though. Each color has a different wavelength. Blue light waves are the shortest of the bunch, which makes them the easiest to scatter in all directions. So, when moonlight passes through our atmosphere, the blue part of that light spreads out the most. That's why the moon looked like a fuzzy blue blob with a halo instead of its usual white glow. It's the same reason the sky looks blue during the day. Sunlight hits our Earth's atmosphere, and the blue wavelengths scatter way more than the reds or yellows. Our eyes pick up that scattered blue light and boom, blue sky. So basically, the ISS astronauts weren't seeing a new phenomenon. They were seeing the same science that makes summer skies look so bright. Only this time, the moon got the blue makeover. Then, residents of Newburyport, Massachusetts, saw a fire rainbow pop up out of nowhere on June 2, 2024. Now, technically, it's called a circumhorizontal arc, and it happens when sunlight hits ice crystals high in the clouds at just the right angle, bending into a slice of rainbow that looks like it's flaming across the sky. It's all about timing and angles. The sun needs to be over 58 degrees high, and you need cirrus clouds or jet contrails carrying ice crystals. Light passes through the crystals, splits, and suddenly, boom, a rainbow in the clouds, usually just peeking through gaps. It's not just Massachusetts. In Weatherford, Texas, on April 15, 2025, jellyfish clouds called virga did the same thing. Ice was falling but never hitting the ground, creating a floating rainbow halo. And on April 25, 2024, in Ohio, photographers caught the crystals scattering light into perfect rainbow colors again. So, next time you're outside, keep your eyes peeled. Mother Nature loves to show off, and sometimes she paints the sky on fire. In 1994, the Sherman family bought a small ranch in the state of Utah, 150 miles southeast of Salt Lake City. A spacious house, beautiful nature, a starry sky. One night, Terry Sherman heard a strange noise coming from the outside. He went out of the house and saw a huge wolf. He had never seen a wolf of this size. Terry chased the animal away and ran after it, but the wolf's tracks were lost. It was as if it had disappeared into thin air. This was just one of the many creepy and strange cases that occurred at Skinwalker Ranch. The land where the farm is located used to be inhabited by the Ute people. In the past, they clashed with the Navajo, who, according to legend, sent skinwalkers on them. According to locals, a skinwalker is an evil witch who can take the form of any animal or human. There are rumors that skinwalkers still wander in this area. Perhaps the Sherman family saw one of them, but it's not that important. The fact is that the appearance of the huge wolf was just the beginning. Over the next 2 years, the family reported strange flashes of light, mysterious objects in the sky, crop circles, and mysterious voices that seemed to hover overhead. But the worst thing was the damage to livestock. The Sherman family, fortunately, acted contrary to all the cliches of horror movies. In 1996, they sold the cottage to Robert Bigelow, a man who had a lot of money and was interested in buying this particular ranch. But why? Because Robert Bigelow was a fan of strange, unusual phenomenon. He founded the National Institute for Discovery Science, or NIDSI, and the area where Skinwalker Ranch is located had been the center of attraction for creepy things. Since the 1950s, there have been hundreds of reports of mysterious objects in the sky in this region. And no, those are not your typical round flying saucers. People talked about different bright lights that took the form of doorways or portals. So, Robert Bigelow and his NIDSI reported on glowing figures and animal diseases. But over the years of research, they could not provide any reliable evidence of the existence of something extraordinary. People saw all those strange phenomena, but their equipment didn't catch anything. So it all looked like a big hoax. But in 2016, something interesting happened. Skinwalker Ranch was sold to an anonymous buyer. 4 years later, the new owner did something no one had done before. Now imagine how cool it would be if all the strange phenomena were recorded not on old video cameras with poor quality, but on cool equipment with high-resolution video recording, powerful microphones, thermal imagers, and sensors. And what if you could also watch a live broadcast using this equipment? Well, that's exactly what the new rancher did. His name is Brandon Fugel, a real estate mogul from Utah. He not only bought the ranch, but also signed a contract with the History Channel to create a show, The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. The point of this project is to apply a scientific approach to unexplained phenomena. To do this, he turned the ranch into a big reality show that's been running for 5 years. The first thing Brandon Fugel stated was that there would be no falsifications, fakes, or computer graphics. No show exploring strange phenomena can compare with this one in terms of realism and authenticity. Fugel uses thermographic imaging systems, plane transponder data receivers, magnetometers, special cameras that detect infrared radiation and convert it to images, and other complicated scientific equipment. He shares all the data with the audience and allows the most devoted fans of the show to monitor 50 cameras with microphones installed throughout the territory live at any moment. For money, of course. Membership in the Skinwalker Ranch Insiders program starts at $8 per month. During the entire existence of the show, more than 10,000 people have signed up. Participants can not only watch the ranch through cameras, but also rotate them and zoom in and out. In addition to cameras and thermal imagers, Fugel launched special lasers into the sky that reflect off any surface. If the sky is clear, the lasers go far up. If there's an object, the lasers reflect off it. In one of the episodes, they used this equipment to detect something flying and invisible. Fugel also said that he had seen strange flying objects with his own eyes. Skinwalker Ranch turned out to be a real twilight zone for him. Now one day, the camera footage showed one of the doors slam shut. Just like that, without any wind. Other terrible phenomena are connected with livestock. Animals often get hurt, and many of them simply don't survive. And there are loads of such strange, unexplained cases. Each episode of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch is dedicated to a phenomenon and its exploration. But has expensive equipment helped to unravel any secrets or prove the existence of extraterrestrial or mystical forces? If this had been confirmed, the whole world would probably already know about it. Therefore, at the moment, it's just an interesting show for fans of mysterious phenomena. There's no direct evidence of the existence of anything unusual there. But, at the same time, there's no explanation for many creepy things. The show offers a huge scope for speculation and research. Local folklore, flying objects, strange voices, not unlike mine, and many unexplained phenomenon are all in one place. If all these stories are true, why are they happening exactly in this area? There are a lot of theories, but let's look at a few of the most popular ones. The first and most obvious one. Imagine that you have a popular show that makes you money. People watch it only because it shows mysterious, inexplicable things. But what if there's an explanation? In this case, the popularity of the show will drop and you'll lose money. It's logical, but why would a real estate mogul with a fortune of several $billion deceive people? Besides, if you watch some episodes, you'll see that Fugel is truly passionate about this project. One of the most popular theories is about visitors from other planets. After all, we have glowing flying objects, bright lights in the sky, electrical interferences, and the ability to elude camera lenses. Also, some believe that an unknown object is hidden in the mountain, located next to the ranch. What if it's a spaceship that crashed there millions of years ago and was swallowed by the mountain? It may be emitting bizarre radiation that drives animals crazy and causes hallucinations in humans. A popular, but a rather banal version. Let's move on. The next theory is similar to the previous one, but instead of guests from another planet, it speaks about guests from another dimension. Ooh. Meet the multiverse version. Some unknown creatures from another reality come here, explore this ranch, and leave. This theory explains why some flying objects in the sky look like portals. Those portals may cause malfunctions in electrical appliances. There's one weak point in this theory. Why do these portals appear on the lonely ranch and nowhere else? A strange choice of travel for the residents of other dimensions. Now, the most likely theory belongs to a neuroscientist who claims that all the oddities on the ranch are connected to the geophysical force of the planet. Seismic activity, geomagnetic fields, and shifts in tectonic plates can affect some parts of the human brain responsible for hallucinations. Electromagnetic forces can also affect the stable operation of electrical appliances. So, perhaps all the oddities of this place are the result of increased seismic activity. Glowing lights, giant wolves that leave no footprints, and voices in the air can be a massive hallucination. But if this is true, why doesn't anything similar happen in other places with seismic activity? This idea leads to another theory related to electromagnetic interference. This phenomenon incapacitates batteries, drones, microphones, video cameras, and other equipment. Perhaps it affects the human brain too. But what about those poor affected animals? There are still too many unanswered questions, so stay tuned. So it turns out that you can't drive between South America and North America, and there's a simple reason for that. There are no roads connecting the two continents, not even a rudimentary one. Technically, you could try your luck crossing on foot, but let me tell you, that would be a huge mistake. The region that connects the two continents is called the Darien Gap. It stretches across southern Panama's Darien province and the northern part of Colombia. The only land route there is a 60-mile jungle trek. Crossing it can take anywhere from 3 to 10 days. It depends on weather conditions, how much you're carrying, and honestly, just pure luck. Chance plays a big role here, because this isn't some chill, relaxing nature walk. It's a harsh, extreme environment, known for being completely isolated and one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Still, people seem to forget that and go there anyway. Every year, the number of people crossing just keeps growing. In 2014, fewer than 10,000 people crossed the gap. In 2023, that number increased to 520,000. Now, you might be wondering, what are so many people doing in the middle of the two American continents, risking all that danger? Well, that's because the Darien Gap has become a route for refugees migrating to North America. But to get there, they face all kinds of dangers, from insect bites and infections to serious fractures. We're talking about a no-man's land. Since there are no police stations, immigrants must also watch out for thieves. Along the way, they have no choice but to rely on and support each other. Most people start the crossing with at least a tent or tarp, rain boots, water, and some food. But these things get heavy fast, and people normally can't carry enough supplies for the entire journey. At some point, people start drinking river water to avoid dehydration. But the water's full of bacteria and dirt, so it causes intestinal issues. And if things get serious, there's no medical help there. To make this whole scenario even worse, the temperatures are brutal, often hitting over 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, a small subset of people who venture through the Darien Gap are hardcore adventurers and travelers looking for a survival experience in the jungle. But this region is no place for a relaxing vacation. A group of tourists who went there in 2023 ended up getting jungle rot, a fungus that affects the feet. The situation got so bad that a woman had to be carried out by the group on the last day because she couldn't walk. No matter how prepared people are for the Darien Gap, in the end, survival mostly comes down to luck. Out there, travelers won't find cities with solid infrastructure where they can crash at a hotel and gear up for the next day. In some spots, they might stumble across basic camps right in the jungle. These camps might offer wooden platforms for tents, bucket showers, toilets, and even plates of chicken and rice. But it all comes at a price. Wi-Fi, for example, might cost $2 an hour, and that seems like a pretty good deal, considering there's no cell phone service on the trail. They pretty much lose all contact with the outside world. Now picture a dense rainforest with steep, muddy terrain. The hiking trail is littered with boulders and tangled with vines, like nature's own tripwires. It climbs sharply over a mountain, becoming a serious challenge even for someone in good physical shape. The area also gets constant heavy rainfall, which can lead to landslides, flash flooding, and extremely muddy conditions. The situation gets so intense that even the t-shirts and faces of those who make the crossing end up covered in mud. They'll also have to cross a lot of fast-moving rivers. A Venezuelan dad who recently went through the area with his 2 kids said their sneakers ripped apart on the very first day. That's how powerful the rivers can be. And they're deep, too. Sometimes the water reaches all the way up to their shoulders. But the dangers in that area aren't recent. For centuries, the Darien Gap was thought to be impossible to cross. The first Europeans who ventured into Latin America saw it as kind of a jungle training school. They totally knew about its dangers, but still, many adventurers tried to make the crossing in the years that followed. In 1854, for example, an expedition disappeared for 49 days in the jungle, battling starvation and exhaustion. Then again, in 1870, a group of 100 men set out to cross it. Even though they were well prepared and carried cutting-edge equipment for the time, they still suffered tremendously during the journey. They had to rely on incredible resilience to survive the challenge. Over the years, people who ventured in often ended up passing away from hunger, thirst, and even drowning in rivers. They also faced the risk of being attacked by dangerous animals like jaguars, white-lipped pecaries, and the fer de lance, a fast, irritable snake that is one of the most venomous out there. The area is also swarming with mosquitoes, which can spread serious health problems. Leaning against trees to rest can also be risky. This jungle is full of spiked chunga palm trees, which are covered in long black spines up to 8 inches long. Unfortunately for us, these spines are covered in all sorts of bacteria. Just brush against a chunga, and you could end up with infected wounds. And yet another danger is getting lost in the dense forest and never finding your way back to safety. These days, though, this risk is a lot lower. Some people have mentioned color-coded markers that help guide travelers and keep them from going the wrong way. If they see blue or green fabric tied to trees, it means keep walking. But if they spot red fabric, that's a sign they're going the wrong way and need to turn around quickly. Since there are so many dangers, why not just build a road through the Darien Gap? While it might seem like a good idea, building a road connecting Panama and Colombia isn't really that simple. The Darien Gap has a humid climate, tough terrain, and constant rainfall, which means any attempt to build a functional road would be highly challenging and super expensive. Even though there have been previous attempts to fill in the gap. See, there's a huge road system called the Pan-American Highway, which stretches all the way from Alaska to the southern tip of Argentina. Nowadays, this highway hits a roadblock right at the Darien Gap. But it wasn't supposed to be like this, as the original idea was for the road to go through there. Leaders from Latin American countries tried to make this plan happen in the 70s, and then again in the 90s. But a lot of people were against it, mainly because they wanted to protect the local communities and the rainforest. Since the Darien Gap is mostly untouched by humans, it's one of the most biodiverse places on the planet. It's believed that 1 in 5 species are endemic to the region, meaning they only exist in that specific area, like the Darien pocket gopher and the slatty slender mouse opossum. A road would have really damaged the ecosystem in the area, so the plans were scrapped. Eventually, an alternative was created to travel by sea. At least 2 companies started a ferry service connecting the 2 countries. However, the business wasn't profitable, and they ended up shutting down. Not long ago, Panama decided to close the Darien Gap route. Now they're sealed off with barbed wire fencing. It might just be a matter of time before other routes are created. But if you are an adventurer looking to visit South America, it's probably not best to wait for that. Traveling by plane to Colombia will always be a much safer option.
Humans are at the top of the food chain, but despite this, some creatures cause us a lot of trouble, and we can't do anything about them. Look at these flies with red eyes and blue-green bodies. These are some farmers' worst nightmare in the United States of America. Meet the New World screwworm flies. These little troublemakers have been munching on livestock from Florida to California for centuries, racking up some serious damage to the agricultural scene. To combat these pesky flies, the U.S. Department of Agriculture dropped a whopping 15 million sterile screwworm larvae from helicopters along the Panama-Colombia border. There's even a factory in Panama cranking out these sterile larvae like it's factory-fresh fruit. This action sounds weird, but it makes a lot of sense. The thing is, female flies only get one shot at mating in their entire lives. So if they happen to mate with a sterile dude, that's it. No offspring, ever. This clever trick means healthy screwworms can't reproduce when surrounded by sterile pals, which keeps their numbers in check. But how do we make these male flies sterile in the first place? Simple. A little radiation zap does the trick. You throw a bunch of flies in a lab, give them a quick spin through an X-ray machine, and then drop them from a helicopter into the wild, where their relatives are hanging out. If screwworms start making a comeback, inspectors hop on ATVs and cruise thousands of miles to hunt down any infected animals and stop the spread. There's no magic trick to wipe out these parasites completely, but the game plan is clear. Keep the sterile fly drops coming and stay one step ahead of these pesky little critters. Do you know why it's too dangerous to move animals from one habitat to another? There's a possibility that they won't encounter predators in the new area and will become an invasive species that will provoke an ecological disaster. Here's a simple example. In the 30s in the 20th century, farmers from Australia faced a serious problem. Cane beetles were spoiling sugarcane in the northern part of the country. Insects devoured a huge amount of the harvest, and people couldn't stop it. They didn't want to spoil the cane with poisonous pesticides, so they brought a group of cane toads from South America in the hope that the toads would eat the pests. But when these toads found themselves in the reed fields, they couldn't reach the bugs, as they lived on tall reeds. The toads just couldn't jump at such height and get the pests. So instead of beetles, they began to eat other insects. Amphibians started multiplying at a tremendous rate. The female cane toad can lay about 30,000 eggs at a time. After 3 days, small tadpoles hatch from the eggs. They swim in the water for 20 weeks and then turn into grown-up toads that live from 5 to 10 years. Millions of jumping animals began taking over the entire northern part of the continent, destroying all the biodiversity around. Leaves, grass, insects, carrion. Toads ate all this and didn't leave food for other animals. The problem was that the toads turned out to be very hardy creatures. Heat, cold, rain, droughts, they can breed anywhere and nothing can stop them. But what about other animals? Australia is full of alligators, big birds, and other creatures that would love to feast on croaking amphibians. Yes, it's true. But any animal that tried to eat these toads didn't survive. The problem is that cane toads are venomous. There are special glands behind their eyes that produce strong toxins that cause serious health problems in any animal. Some farmers saw birds falling from the sky after they had swallowed these amphibians. More than 80 years have passed since farmers brought 100 cane toads to Australia. Now, there are about 1.5 billion of them. They have already covered 386,000 square miles, which is about the same area as the states of Texas and Oklahoma combined. And so far, scientists and biologists haven't come up with an effective way to deal with them. People tried to catch them, but it was useless. Even if you catch 98 toads out of 100 next to a small pond, the 2 remaining toads can produce 30,000 eggs per night. Nature may be able to restore balance when some animals with immunity to toad toxins appear in Australia. But at the moment, cane toads are unstoppable. How can we stop the uncontrolled population of mosquitoes that are dangerous to humans? The correct answer is to create 735 million genetically modified mosquitoes and mix these 2 groups. All over the world, many species of mosquitoes carry infections that cause serious health problems to humans. Almost no one likes mosquitoes. These buzzing insects prevent us from sleeping, and their bites are incredibly itchy. Many people would probably be happy if these creatures disappeared from the face of the earth. And scientists might have found a way to make this wish come true. Only female mosquitoes bite us because they need food to produce eggs. So, scientists released genetically modified male mosquitoes with a special protein in their bodies. After two mosquitoes come into contact, this protein is transmitted from the male to the female and then prevents it from producing offspring. All this happens before the age when females begin to bite. So, females can't create offspring, which means they don't need to bite people and animals anymore. And the more of such proteins scientists spread, the smaller the mosquito population will be. It sounds good, but about 240,000 people have signed a petition to cancel this experiment. Many scientists believe that the disappearance of one insect species can lead to a biological catastrophe. Nature is a complex, balanced system where the slightest change can lead to serious problems. Mosquitoes are a food source for many reptiles and amphibians. The extinction of mosquitoes can trigger the disappearance of many species. It's like a chain reaction of catastrophes, the end of which is unknown. Nevertheless, modified mosquitoes have already been released in Florida, and it seems that nothing terrible has happened. The good news is that people have fewer health problems after that. Moreover, since 2019, about 1.5 billion mosquitoes have been released worldwide. It has saved millions of lives and hasn't disrupted the delicate balance of nature yet. Recently, scientists have released another group of safe mosquitoes in East Africa. Well, let's hope that scientists have everything under control. Invasive species are not always mosquitoes, flies, or amphibians. These can also be large animals, such as feral pigs or super pigs. These pigs are a mix of domestic swine and wild boar. There are already almost 7 million feral hogs in the south of the USA. Thanks to people's efforts, these animals haven't spread to the north yet, but the danger to the northern states comes from Canada. Pigs were brought there in the 80s to support agriculture. But in the early 2000s, wild boars lost their popularity. They just stayed in the wild, and farmers were sure that those animals wouldn't survive the harsh Canadian winter. Oh, how wrong they were. Wild pigs turned out to be hardy, mobile, and capable of rapid reproduction. These animals dig and tear up the ground, eat almost everything they come across, and thus take food from other animals. By the way, other creatures can become their lunch too. Wild pigs attack mice, geese, ducks, and some species of deer. They trample crops, grass, and flowers and are not afraid of anything. They're like natural bulldozers. Any farm is in danger of extinction if it's in the path of thousands of super pigs. And people can't do anything with them. The northern states understand that an invasion is imminent, so they're preparing for a long battle. Super pigs love swampy areas with tall grass. Canadian and American farmers will try to drive them into more open areas and fence those places off. The plan is not perfect, but it can slow the pigs down and save some time. If you're planning a trip across the Atlantic, you should prepare for more than just the jet lag. Depending on where you land, life in Europe can seem a bit unusual. So it's best to do a bit of research before you travel. Speaking of quirky little differences, one of the first things you may notice is the lack of AC. Hope you like fresh air because central air conditioning isn't everywhere like you might be used to. In Europe, you might find that someone's flat, office, or even a full restaurant doesn't have an AC unit. That's because some Europeans rely solely on their windows to get a breeze. However, bigger places like grocery stores and malls usually keep things well ventilated. Water in European restaurants is not always free either, even though this is common practice in the US. Sure, you'll get a fancy glass bottle at most places, but you'll also see it on your bill. More so, if you ask for water, be sure to specify if you'd like it still, because you might get sparkling water instead. Forget about getting a glass full of ice water too. You might get cold water from the fridge, but Europeans don't do the whole tons of ice thing like they do in the US. If you enjoy sightseeing on a budget, you know how helpful those public toilets can be. After walking for hours, it's great to stumble upon a bathroom where you can freshen up a bit. Well, you better have the equivalent of 50 cents or so in your pocket, because in many European countries, you've got to pay to use these public restrooms. Even fast food restaurants might charge you for the privilege. The best workaround is to head to a mall. Their restrooms are usually free. Also, in the US, bathroom stalls often have a gap at the bottom. Some say this design was chosen for cleaning purposes and accessibility. In Europe, however, stalls tend to reach the floor for more privacy. Name days are also kind of a big deal in Europe, despite not being so popular in the US. Each day of the year is like a mini birthday celebration for someone with a specific name. Europeans who follow this tradition see it as a second birthday, and even some take it more seriously than their actual birthday. Even the way we perceive things can be totally different depending on where you're from. Take a 100-year-old building in Europe that's practically brand new, but in the US, it's considered old. Depending on who you ask, some Americans might even consider an object that is 200 years old to be ancient. Europeans reserve this word for something that comes from a time before the Middle Ages. However, when it comes to distances, it's quite the opposite. Europeans might find driving 100 kilometers, or about 60 miles, to be a lot, while for Americans, that's a short trip. It does make sense if you think about it, though, because Europe is way more crowded. In fact, the entire European Union is only about half the size of the US. Either way, Europeans are always on the move, whether it's inside their continent or jetting off somewhere else on the planet. It's probably because most European countries are so small by comparison that people grow up thinking it's normal and easy to cross borders all the time. Even the appliances tend to be different when comparing the two regions. Take washing machines, for instance. In Europe, most of them only hook up to cold water, and they load from the front. In the US, it's common to have machines that use both hot and cold water and load from the top. On that note, make sure to research the type of electrical plug used in your European country of choice before traveling. You might find you'll need special adapters to be able to use your phone charger or curling iron while on holiday. Thankfully, most hotels are prepared for these issues and can offer adapters on demand, free of charge. Fridges might seem a bit different too. That's because tiny ones are the norm in Europe, except for large families who invest in bigger fridges and freezers. It's not all bad, especially if you enjoy sharing groceries with roommates, less food wastage, and more frequent trips to the store for fresh food. Might also want to polish your metric system knowledge before heading to Europe too. Everyone there is using meters, grams, liters, and Celsius. Sure, people in the US might learn the metric system in school, but they stick to the other system for their everyday lives, with yards, miles, pounds, and Fahrenheit. Make sure you also double-check dates and times before making any reservations. Europeans write their dates like day, month, year, while Americans flip it to month, day, year. Also, in the US, the week usually begins on Sunday and wraps up on Saturday. But in Europe, it starts on Monday and ends on Sunday. Be on the lookout for the different time format too. In some countries, if someone says it's 14, that translates to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Even advertising might seem a bit different when you first land in Europe. In the US, you might see people wandering around in inflatable costumes on the street to promote local business, but that's a rare sight in Europe. Also, those massive billboard signs you often see along American highways aren't available in most European countries. They're usually against the law because it's believed that drivers should be focused more on the road ahead. And such advertising techniques can be too distracting. Moving on to street names and shopping hours. In North America, especially the USA, it's common to name streets with numbers, like 5th Avenue or 16th Street. But if you head over to Europe, you'll find that streets usually have actual names. In some really rural spots in Europe, you might even stumble upon roads with no names at all. In Europe, there's also a cool tradition of naming roads that connect cities after the city they lead to. Shopping hours in Europe can be a bit confusing too. at times even frustrating. You've probably heard of the siesta in Spain, with some Mediterranean countries having similar customs. It's when shops and businesses take a little afternoon break. Smaller venues in European cities might close up for lunch breaks or have shorter hours on weekends. Some might even stay shut altogether on specific days. It's best to check out the local schedule if you're planning some retail therapy while traveling in Europe. Those shopping hours can really affect your plans and how easily you can get your hands on the stuff you need. While Americans tend to smile more, even to strangers, it can seem a bit unusual to people from other countries. There's a reason behind it though. You see, over the years, the US became this melting pot with people coming in from all over the globe. Being friendly and agreeable became crucial to bridge the gaps created by different cultures and languages. Sometimes it's more helpful to be nice than to be brutally honest. TV watching preferences can also seem different in Europe. Take Norway, for example, where you'll find this cool concept called slow TV. You know how we sometimes zone out in front of a show for hours? Well, Norwegians have turned that into a national sport, if you'd like. Think of it as the visual equivalent of background music. None of us get glued to the screen watching hours of wood burning or knitting marathons. But you might want to check it out when you need some background entertainment that doesn't demand your full attention. Speaking of taking things slow, you might have also heard about a concept called hygge. It's this whole way of life up in the Nordic European countries. Some think these life principles could be the secret to happiness. It's about creating a life that's free from annoying or overwhelming stuff. It's also about prioritizing your relationships and striving to always have a positive attitude. It was hot in the tropics, a type of heat unknown to the men aboard the Niña, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria ships, led by Italian explorer Christopher Columbus. It had been months since these men left their home cities in Europe, and until then, Europe was all they knew. They were given a difficult and even dangerous task. Spain hired Columbus to find a new western route to Asia. They needed new routes for trading and buying spices, but it was far from a simple job. I mean, crossing the ocean never is. Little did those sailors know that their lives were about to change forever. "Land in sight!" someone must have shouted on board. But when they finally stepped on that new foreign land, they discovered they were not in Asia. They had landed in the Americas. You've probably heard this tale before. Historically speaking, Columbus arrived in the Americas in 1492. But what would have happened if Columbus's ship had faced a lethal storm in the Atlantic Ocean and had never made it to the new land? What would today's history look like? First things first, nobody discovered anything. When we say that the Americas were discovered, we're kind of ignoring the millions of people who already lived there. You see, the Americas were only discovered from Europe's point of view. Columbus would only have discovered something if when he got there, he was faced with acres and acres of empty land. But that was not the case at all. Second, Columbus was not the first explorer to land in the Americas. Believe it or not, the Vikings approached American shores in the 10th century. Their expeditions have been well documented and accepted by scholars. Here's what might have happened. Around the year 1000 CE, Viking explorer Leif Erikson sailed to a place called Vinland. Cute name, huh? It's now a region in Canada called Newfoundland. But his crew didn't stay too long. They arrived to find 10 Native Americans napping under their overturned canoes. They attempted some trade, but I'm guessing the Vikings weren't too friendly and the Americans didn't really like them. The Vikings' account of the encounter shows they felt outnumbered and menaced, so they sailed away back to their land. That makes sense, right? As I said earlier, there were millions of people living in the ginormous continent of the Americas. Any foreigner would be outnumbered there. Now take a look at what North America looked like before our buddy Chris got there. It was not divided into the normal states we're used to. And if Columbus had never arrived, the United States would probably never have been united to begin with. After all, there were hundreds of first Americans living in these lands, and they lived amongst their own tribes, quite different from the Europeans. It's not accurate to think that there were no political systems going on in the Americas before Europeans arrived. We just need to understand that they were different from what we're used to today. When Europeans arrived, they imported their belief systems with them, from religious beliefs and language systems to things as simple as clothing habits. If the Americas had developed on their own, maybe their sense of fashion would be completely different today. You see, Europeans had a developed sense of fashion by the time they arrived in the West. They wore things such as this and this. But those don't really work in the tropics, do they? For them, fashion had to do with showing a certain economic status, while in the Americas, that didn't exist. For Native Americans, clothing was mainly functional and related to the weather. In warmer climates, Native people would wear short-like cloths to cover their intimate parts. They would walk bare-chested and use shoes known as moccasins. Yes, similar to the moccasins you probably own. In colder climates, they would resort to using leather and fur parkas. Of course, there was always the special clothing used for ceremonial purposes. So I'm guessing that if Columbus never reached the Americas, brands such as the Gap, Hollister, and Forever 21 would have never existed. But we could live with that, couldn't we? Here's a wild thought. Let's say that by the 1700s, Native Americans had developed complex engineering skills. They built big boats, maybe a bit smaller in size than the traditional European ships, and decided to venture across the ocean. Let's say they were the ones who arrived on European shores, in places such as Spain and Portugal. They carried gifts and goods with them for trading, of course. This was also a common practice amongst them back home, known as potlatch. Sure, they were received with suspicion by the Europeans, who had only ever traded with Asia. But with this inverted encounter, a different type of relationship began between Native Americans and Europeans. Since Europeans didn't claim ownership of the Americas, the people from the so-called New Land weren't considered inferior to them. Actually, they stood side by side as equals, each one with their own power and set of knowledge. Native Americans taught Europeans a new type of ruling system, a more decentralized one. So modern-day structures of government would look really different. Maybe Europeans decided that 4 years was a long time for someone to hold decision power, so they implemented smaller and more frequent elections. Oh, and the landscape of European cities also changed a lot. Instead of huge statues made of copper and bronze showing men in ships on their way to the Americas, the Europeans built totem poles in honor of their alliances with First Americans. In terms of medical and medicinal knowledge, they had a lot to exchange about. While Europeans were making advances in traditional medicine, Americans had developed an impressive knowledge of herbs that could heal a series of things. Before they knew it, Europeans were selling different varieties of plants in their pharmaceutical establishments. They had one big barrier though: language. Since Europeans never arrived on American shores, they also never taught their language to Americans. So maybe in this scenario, both cultures brought in their best linguists and tried creating a new language from scratch. Something that could be comprehensible from both perspectives and that could encompass both of their worldviews. The implications of this on modern-day life would be really profound if you stop to think about it. Let's say that this newly created language involved some symbols and drawings in it. You see, Native Americans often told stories using symbols known as pictograms. They were quite literal sometimes. As you can see, a mountain was represented by, well, a mountain. It's crazy to think that this system of communication has been around for 5,000 years, since it was actually invented by the Sumerians. And hey, maybe even our laptop keyboards would come equipped with these symbols, and you could write more visually hybrid and fun emails than the ones you write today. The American landscape would have also changed. You see, if neither Columbus nor any of the other European dudes that went after him reached the so-called New Land, Central and Latin American cities would look completely different than they do today. Maybe the bustling empires of the time, such as the Inca, the Maya, and the Aztec, would have grown immensely. To be fair, they were already pretty big by the time Europeans got there. Some pre-Columbian Maya cities were as big as medieval London and Paris in terms of population. But oh my, The Mayan Empire would have grown so much that it could have spread out all over of Central America. They could have developed their pyramid building craft up to the point that they managed to build an even larger pyramid than the Giza pyramid in Egypt. So tourists would come from all over the world to visit. And in South America, let's just say the region could have turned into a huge forest, bigger than the Amazon. The Inca could have spread through the Andes and then into the mainland. Places such as Brazil and Argentina never existed. But in their place, there would have been dreamy tropical settlements, which would have become a worldwide reference in sustainable living. In some ways, the United States is a whole different world, totally different from every other place. So let's take a look at what's normal there that baffles people from the outside. One of the first things a foreigner notices when entering the country is flags. American flags everywhere. On buildings like schools and houses, and on clothes like shorts, t-shirts, you name it. Throughout history, Americans have changed 27 flags. The current American flag was only adopted in 1960 and is so far the longest-lasting flag of the country. It wasn't created by the authorities, though. In 1958, there was a contest for a design of the new American flag, and the winning flag was made by a 17-year-old high school student from Ohio. The reason why Americans love their flag so much is national pride. But why not so many countries do the same? Well, some countries avoid displaying them for historical reasons. Other countries only raise the flag on special occasions to highlight the importance of the event. Still, some countries display their flag as often as Americans do. In Denmark, people are quite proud of their flag too. They decorate the winter holiday tree and birthday cakes with them, and you can always find stickers with Danish flags, red and white candles, and other goodies with the flag in a grocery store. People in Sweden are also very much into their flag and have flagpoles everywhere. Now, let's go to a restaurant, shall we? Many things there are very specific to the States. Like, for example, tons of ice in every drink. Turns out there is some history to this preference. America has always had a lot of ice as a resource, since New England's lakes and rivers have a lot of those during winter. Centuries ago, before refrigerators and other helpful cooling machines, that kind of cold resource was very valuable, and the States started exporting ice to other parts of the world. And also, of course, consuming it themselves. They started to put ice in their hot drinks, in contrast to the British, who were always drinking their beverages hot. The ice in the drinks has become an American thing, and it was also considered a rich person's drink. Yep, the ice would also show a person's status. Of course, with time, when refrigerators appeared, ice became available to everyone, and Americans started to add it to their drinks commonly. The habit remained, but also, ice drinks are very refreshing, which is especially important in the hot south of the country. But if you come from abroad and don't want your drink freezing cold, always specify it to the waiter. The next striking thing is the huge portions that are served, and there is a reason for that too. It wasn't always like this, but in the second half of the last century, due to pesticides and fertilizers, farmers started to be able to grow more food than they used to. The government caught on, subsidizing them to grow even more food. So, the amount of available food increased. Over time, companies started to increase the sizes of their portions. Why serve less food and get less money if you can serve a bit more and also charge more? That's good for business, and it's a win-win. Customers get more food for just a little bit more money. So, larger portions stuck. Okay, now we need to take a little toilet break. And, surprisingly, there are a lot of foreigners who find American toilets weird. First, what's up with those huge gaps in bathroom stalls? Let's start with the more obvious part, gaps on the bottom of the doors. Those are quite common, even outside the US, and they serve several purposes. First, you can see if there's a person inside without trying to break into an occupied stall. Second, it provides some ventilation and makes it easier to clean the floor in the bathrooms. the gaps on the sides are more questionable. Of course, people on the outside can't see everything going on behind the door, but still, there's not much privacy whatsoever. In most other countries, the gaps are either negligible or non-existent. So what's up with them in America? I did some research. Some sources say that since every inch of material is expensive, wide gaps are made to reduce the costs of bathroom stalls. Other sources say that when people feel exposed like this, they have fewer incentives to do something illegal in public bathrooms. Next observation, American toilets have way more water in their bowls in comparison to, for example, European ones. The reason is that those types of toilets use different flashing systems, and an American one needs more water to flush effectively. In many countries, especially in Asia, most bathrooms have bidets, which are used for after-toilet cleaning, and tourists don't understand why Americans wouldn't adopt those too. After all, if you step in mud, you'll go and wash your foot instead of just wiping it off with a tissue. The same logic works here. Also, it reduces toilet paper usage. So it's more sustainable and it's environmentally friendly. Some say there's a strong stigma in America around bidets that is extremely hard to overcome. Others say that toilets in the US don't have enough room to install a bidet, so they don't have those, especially if there are other well-known ways. Before we leave the restaurant, we need to tip the waiter. Tipping in the United States is way more common than in most other countries. You're expected to tip any service person who helped you with something. While some kind of tipping exists in some other countries, the extent of it is smaller. And there are also countries like Japan and Denmark where tipping isn't a thing at all. Those countries have minimum wage laws that dictate decent wages employers must pay their workers. This way, the need to pay money to service stuff isn't pushed onto the customers. By the way, here's one more fact about the prices. Probably the craziest thing in the States tourists have to adapt to are prices in stores. The tax isn't included into the displayed price and is added on top while checking out. So people who are short on money can't pre-calculate the price they will have to pay to make sure that they have enough money. But really, why is it so? The main reason behind such a weird policy is transparency. This way, taxpayers know how much tax they pay and can resist raising the tax rate in case it comes on the national agenda. Also, it allows buyers to compare the costs of products across states fairly, since tax rates may differ. So, if the tax isn't included, you compare the actual bread costs between Alabama and Alaska, for example. In some places in America, it's not very easy to get around unless you travel by car. In some regions, there's often no sidewalk taking you to the closest convenience store or a crosswalk, allowing you to cross the road right in front of the store. The main reason for that is probably the fact that the United States is a big country with vast lands and everything is spread out. Neighborhoods can be scattered around, wide suburban territories quite far away from one another, so that's already far from being walking distance, and sidewalks aren't needed because, yes, no one's walking. Studies show that Spanish or Germans walk at least twice as much as Americans, but in those countries, everything is way closer. And last and not least, you guessed it, the imperial system. It's based on the human body. A foot is an average foot size of a person, so you might think it's quite intuitive for anyone. Well, no. Foreigners are incredibly confused with feet, inches, gallons, and Fahrenheits, and tend to convert it all to the familiar metric system. Well, in this sense, the British are even more confusing. Those guys use both imperial and metric systems. For height, it's mostly feet and inches, but for weight, kilograms. Great Britain used to have the imperial system, but later they were forced to switch to the metric system. So now they're using a combination, whatever helps to be more precise.
Some mistakes have the power to change the course of history. One such story has to do with an old, boring key that could have saved the Titanic from its infamous demise. The key belonged to the crow's nest locker that housed binoculars, which could have helped the lookout spot the iceberg sooner. There's more. the key wasn't even on board the ship when it set sail. The second officer took it with him when he was taken off the ship at the last minute. As the story goes, the officer forgot to hand the key over to his replacement in his hurry to disembark. So, when the lookouts were in desperate need of binoculars, they were out of luck. One of the lookouts, named Fred Fleet, even testified that if they had had binoculars, they would have spotted the iceberg in time to avoid it. And when asked how much sooner, Fleet replied, "Enough to get out of the way." In 2015, some auctioneers got their hands on Blair's key and presented it as one of the most important artifacts from the Titanic. They truly believed it could have saved the ship. Blair kept the key as a souvenir and passed it down to his daughter, Nancy. At one point, it was up for auction with a price tag of over $80,000. Blair himself was quite the hero, it seems. A year after the Titanic disaster, he was awarded a gallantry medal for saving a crewman who had fallen overboard while he had been on board the liner Majestic. He may have forgotten a key, but he sure didn't forget to be a hero when it counted. This next story is both funny and tragic. It's about NASA's lost $125 million Mars Climate Orbiter. The spacecraft engineers failed to convert from English to metric measurements before the craft was launched, and as a result, they lost it. The navigation team at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory used the metric system of millimeters and meters, while Lockheed Martin Astronautics in Denver used the English system of inches, feet, and pounds. JPL engineers mistook acceleration readings measured in English units of pound-seconds for a metric measure of force called Newton-seconds. What's worse is that none of JPL's quality control procedures caught the error in the 9 months it took the spacecraft to make its 461 million mile flight to Mars. That's a long time to be lost in translation, don't you think? The miscalculations were enough to throw the spacecraft so far off track that it flew too deeply into the Martian atmosphere and was destroyed when it entered its initial orbit around Mars. It's embarrassing to lose a spacecraft to such a simple math error. And it's hard to think of another example of such a large loss due to English versus metric confusion. Ever heard about the mathematical mistake that led to the discovery of the New World? Spoiler alert, it involves a guy named Christopher Columbus and a really big globe. Back in 1492, Columbus set sail from Spain with a mission to find a new trade route to Asia. He was convinced that he was less than 3,000 miles away from Japan, and just a bit more sailing would get him to the Indies with all their tasty spices. The only problem was that Columbus was a bit off in his calculations, like way off. He made a mistake in estimating the size of the globe, which led him to believe that Earth was far smaller than it actually is. Now I know what you're thinking. Wasn't Columbus afraid that he would fall off the edge of the world? Contrary to popular myth, Columbus and his crew knew the Earth was a globe, just like the ancient Greeks did 2 millennia earlier. They weren't worried about falling off the edge, but rather about the size of the ocean they planned on crossing. And to make matters worse, Columbus had no idea that an unknown landmass existed between Spain and Asia. After weeks at sea, Columbus finally reached the Caribbean. He believed that he had landed on the outskirts of Asia, and so named the islands the West Indies. He went on to explore the Caribbean and the northern coast of South America. But here's where things get really interesting. Even though Columbus insisted until his last day that he had reached Asia, another Italian explorer named Amerigo Vespucci mapped the eastern shore of South America down to Brazil and proved conclusively that Columbus had actually discovered a whole new world. A German mapmaker saw Amerigo's maps and labeled the new landmass America after him. And since his maps were super popular at the time, the name stuck. One man named Alexander Fleming stumbled upon one of the most significant medical discoveries of all time by accident. At one point in his career, Fleming observed the demise of many people from uncontrollable infections. Antiseptics were used to fight this, but they often did more harm than good. In 1922, while he had a cold himself, Fleming transferred some of his, nasal discharge to a petri dish and left it on his cluttered desk. When he finally examined it weeks later, he found that an enzyme had some antimicrobial properties. It wasn't until 1928, when Fleming left an uncovered petri dish next to an open window, that he stumbled upon the discovery that would change the world. The dish became contaminated with fungus spores. And when he examined them under the microscope, Fleming discovered that the bacteria near the fungus were dying. He managed to isolate the fungus and found that it was effective against numerous things that cause diseases. And thus, penicillin was discovered. As Fleming himself put it, "I did not discover penicillin. Nature did that. I only discovered it by accident." Talk about a lucky break. In the early 1520s, the east coast of the United States of America was a big mystery waiting to be solved. The Spanish found Florida, and the English and Portuguese found Newfoundland, but the area in between was like a blank spot on the map. France decided to take action and sent an expedition to explore the area. They chose a guy called Giovanni da Verrazzano to lead the trip. For this expedition, he got 4 ships. Unfortunately, 2 of them were shipwrecked, and a third one went home after doing some other business on the Spanish coast. Only the flagship, La Dauphine, crossed the Atlantic with Verrazzano and his 50-man crew. Verrazzano set sail from Madeira and landed at Cape Fear. From there, he sailed south, but got a little scared of running into the Spanish, so he returned somewhere north of Charleston. He anchored not far from his original landing spot, but unlike other explorers, he preferred to anchor well out at sea. He did send a boat to the shore, and he met the natives. They were described as wearing just some animal skins covering their bodies and garlands of bird feathers. As Verrazzano sailed along the coast, he reached the outer banks of North Carolina. He thought that the waters he discovered were those of the Pacific. In reality, what he'd stumbled upon was the Pamlico Sound. He thought that North America was just a long, extremely narrow strip of land. This mistake led mapmakers to show North America as almost completely divided in two. Moving on, Verrazzano reached a beautiful place that he called Arcadia, probably Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Sailing further north, he missed the entrances to Chesapeake and Delaware Bays because he kept quite far from the coast until New Jersey. Then, the moment we've all been waiting for, Verrazzano discovered New York Harbor, and he anchored in the Narrows. Later, it was named after him, and now it is spanned by the Verrazzano Narrows Bridge. Once Verrazzano's sea appeared on the map, it became widely accepted and impacted loads of future explorers. For example, Henry Hudson went looking for a passage to the Pacific in the middle latitudes of the continent. But, as it turns out, the Englishman never did find the Pacific Ocean anywhere near Virginia. And the cartographic myth eventually faded away. It's funny to think about how a mistaken belief could have such an impact on history.
If you ever want to call someone, hoping they won't really answer, try Super Bowl night. Over 100 million people are enjoying America's favorite sports finals, which is the most watched television program of the year. American football is called this way, although you play it with your hands because it developed from two sports, rugby and soccer, known as football in Europe. Also, before some major changes in the rules, they both used hands and feet to play. The 1958 NFL Championship game was the first, and so far the only, NFL title game to ever end in overtime. That night, the Baltimore Colts were playing against the New York Giants. The stadium was full with 68,000 fans, and hundreds of thousands were watching it on NBC. At some point, the crowd got so wild that the NBC cable responsible for the broadcast somehow got disconnected. The game was about to be over at any moment, so they had to do something immediately. Earlier that year, the New York Times asked the producer if they had any plan B for such a scenario. He laughingly answered they'd probably have to send someone onto the field to delay the game. And that's exactly what they did. They sent their business manager to run up and down the field after the timeout. Officers were chasing him for a while, and everyone thought that was just a rowdy fan. That's how NBC saved the broadcast, missing only the first play out of the timeout. It's hard to imagine a football game without huddles. I mean those times when they all gather in a tight circle to discuss the strategy, motivate each other, or celebrate. But those huddles only became a thing in the 1890s thanks to Paul Hubbard, a hearing-impaired quarterback for Gallaudet. He didn't want the other teams to read his hand signals, so he gathered his teammates in a tight circle to protect their secrets. The 1982 Stanford Cardinal and California Golden Bears went down in history because of the play that unfolded in the final seconds. Stanford had a 20-19 lead, and there were just 4 seconds left. You'd think that's nothing, but the time was enough for Golden Bears to turn the tables. They did 5 backyard passes, and bam! Final touchdown! They won 25-20. Unlike professional football balls, the balls used at college games have white stripes painted at one of the ends to make it easier to spot the ball during nighttime games. Wilson, a famous sports equipment company, has been the exclusive provider of footballs for NFL games since 1941. They now produce 4,000 footballs every day. The first American football game in history was played between Rutgers and Princeton colleges. It was popular among students, but soon became quite a rough sport. At some point, it was even banned to play football in public spaces. Walter Camp, a famous rugby player, became Yale's football team captain and saved the day. He changed the rules of the game and made it a lot as we know it today. The 20-yard line to the end zone is known as the red zone. Red was chosen for the name, as it's a warning color for the defense. Once the offense reaches this zone, they are in the best scoring position. Gridiron football is another name for the game. No fun stories here. The only reason is that the playing field does look like a gridiron used in cooking. It seems almost impossible that brothers would be coaching NFL teams that play at the Super Bowl, but it happened in 2013. Jim Harbaugh and John Harbaugh coached the San Francisco 49ers and Baltimore Ravens and stood against each other at the big game. Their parents were watching in the Superdome. John, the elder brother, won. They briefly exchanged congratulations after the game, but didn't speak for weeks after it. Both admitted that the game was emotionally super hard for them. There used to be the National Football League and the American Football League, each with its own champion, until they merged in 1970. They had to decide about the new structure and couldn't come to an agreement. And guess how they finally solved it? Well, they just dropped 5 options into a vase and took one out at random. Kansas City Chief Lamar Hunt coined the name Super Bowl as he was inspired by a toy for just 98 cents. His wife found it at a toy store in Dallas, Texas, and told him the little ball could bounce over a small house. Not everyone liked this idea, and there were even contests for a different name, but nothing has beaten the toy-inspired one. The first Super Bowl took place on January 15, 1967. The tickets were just $12 compared to the $100,000 that you'd have to pay for the VIP suite today. Yet, there were still many empty seats at Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, where it took place. They chose the location only 6 weeks before kickoff. Now it's known 3 years before the actual game. Ever since the 5th Super Bowl, they have used Roman numbers for identifying the games. It helps avoid some confusion. For example, Super Bowl 2023 would take place at the beginning of that year, but the majority of the season would have been played in 2022. The only exception was Super Bowl 50. The NFL believed naming it Super Bowl L might have lowered ticket sales. The NFL never pays any of those superstar singers that perform at halftime shows. Appearing there at the prime time brings the artists much more money in the long run, as their record sales always spike after the game. They do get money to cover the expenses they have to prepare for the show, though. It can be more than $10 million, so that's not a bad deal after all. Each Super Bowl team gets 108 balls, 54 of them serve as practice balls, and another 54 are used during the actual game. The usual halftime of the NFL game is 12 to 15 minutes, but the super halftime is 20 to 30 minutes, depending on the performance that's going on. The coin they flipped at the 44 game to decide which team would start the kickoff had spent 11 days on a NASA spaceship orbiting the Earth. To make sure the game is always fair, there must be 7 officials with different functions present on the field. You can recognize them by their black and white striped shirts. The referee is the highest rank among them and has the most responsibilities. Then comes the umpire, the back judge, the head linesman, the side judge, the line judge, and the field judge. Miami has hosted the Super Bowl the most, with 11 games. The runner-up is New Orleans with 10. It normally takes place in a warmer climate or at an indoor stadium. The only exception was the game that took place at Tulane Stadium in New Orleans, when the temperature at game time was 39 degrees Fahrenheit. The Arizona Cardinals are older than the state they represent. The team was founded in 1898, and Arizona officially became a state only 14 years later. The team also had the longest period in NFL history when they didn't win a single game postseason. 51 years. NFL gives the winning team members the Super Bowl rings. Those never repeat each other, as the winners choose how to customize it to make it special. Designing them takes up to 4 months. The ring will normally have the team name and logo, the world champion's title, and the Super Bowl logo and number. The team can award the rings to whomever they decide, not just players, but coaches, trainers, executives, personnel, general staff, and also former players and coaches. That's why the total price of the set is around $5 million. The Green Bay Packers Super Bowl 45 ring had over 100 diamonds, 13 of them representing every title the team has won since 1929.
Everyone stares at the flight attendant as she hastily walks past the passengers. She ignores any request that comes to her and rushes to the cockpit. Everyone looks at each other confused. Is there a problem with the plane? Behind all these worried people, one man is sitting patiently, waiting for his plan to unfold. No one knew the danger they were about to be in. It's Thanksgiving. Everyone is boarding a plane from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington for the holidays. Everything seemed like a typical day at the airport, except for when D.B. Cooper walked in. No one noticed him, and no one suspected anything out of him. He is a man of mystery. And when I say mystery, I mean D.B. Cooper isn't his actual name. Until this day, no one knows his real identity. All we know is that he bought a ticket under the name of Dan Cooper. But the media came into the picture and started telling this story portraying him as D.B. Cooper. And ever since then, he was known by this name. He was described by witnesses as a middle-aged man in his mid-40s. He was wearing a dark business suit with a black raincoat. He wore a white shirt and a thin black tie. The flight was short, 37 minutes to be exact. So nobody figured that something terrible was going to happen. He boarded a Boeing 727, carrying nothing but a black briefcase and a brown paper bag. Back then, there wasn't any background checking or luggage scanning for safety measures. You just walk in, grab your seat, and be done. He strategically took a seat in the last row and ordered some beverages just as the plane was ready for takeoff. In a few minutes, the pilot announces that they're ready to fly. The passengers on board are expecting to munch on some delicious turkey and be with their families in less than an hour. Cooper had other plans and waited until the plane was in mid-flight. He noticed that everyone was minding their own business. He had a note with him and waited for the flight attendant to approach him so that he could give it to her. Her seat was directly behind him, so once she was nearby, he handed her the note. At first, the flight attendant didn't make much of the note, thinking that the middle-aged man was just handing her his phone number. But then, He leaned in towards her and told her to read it. Her face turned white. She couldn't tell whether this was a prank or he was serious. But she looked at him and he wouldn't blink. The note was hinting that he was carrying something devastating in his luggage. To keep everyone safe, he demanded $200,000 by 5 p.m. It might not seem like a lot of money to demand given you're in a position of power, but back then it was a lot. That value now would be around $1.4 million. He also requested 2 front parachutes and 2 main parachutes to be worn on his back. The flight attendant passed the message to the pilot, who made the request through the radio. At first, no one noticed anything, but then news caught on about Cooper's plans. They noticed how the flight attendant was jittery and uncomfortable. Once they landed in Seattle, Cooper wasn't done. He seemed confident in his plan according to the people on board. They brought him the money and refueled the plane so that he can continue with his plan. They also brought the parachutes as he demanded. He was meticulous in the order in which his demands were met. He wouldn't let anyone off the plane unless the money was brought in. He asked for 4 civilian parachutes that the authorities brought from a skydiving school. Once he received his parachutes, he allowed the passengers to leave. The only people left on the plane were 3 flight members and 3 cabin crew. Cooper was losing his patience since refueling the plane was delayed. On top of that, they didn't deliver the money to him in a knapsack as he asked. According to witnesses, he was a calm person and didn't lash out at anyone. But eventually, the plane took off. No one knew what his plan was. He showed the flight plan to the pilots and told them to fly toward Mexico City as slowly as possible and to remain at around 10,000 feet above the ground. The flight route was well designed, like someone who had aviation experience in the past. He told them to leave the landing gear deployed during takeoff and mid-flight, and for the cabin to remain unpressurized. His plan was in motion, but there was another problem. Cooper had been informed that the plane could only travel another 1,000 miles with the amount of fuel given. That means he couldn't make it to Mexico. After much pondering, Cooper decided that they would have to stop for another refueling. They decided to land at Reno Tahoe International Airport in Nevada. Cooper knew that this would stop him from running away with the money, so he told everyone to wait near the cockpit. He was now alone where 35 other passengers would be sitting. It's only been 4 or 5 minutes since the plane took off from Seattle. The pilots received a warning red light flashing, showing that the internal pressure has changed. A witness recalls peeking at him, tying the money to his waist as he strapped on the parachute. Some of the cabin members asked him if he needed any help through the intercom. He simply replied no, and that was the last thing Cooper ever said to them. Once the stairs were deployed out of the tail of the plane, the back end suddenly shifted upward, but the pilot was experienced enough to keep it flying level. They would constantly announce to Cooper that they were about to land and that they needed him to close the aft stairs. But he wasn't responding. No one from the crew went back to see where he was. They landed safely with the stairs still deployed. The authorities rushed to the scene to sweep out the area in case he was still there. But after 30 minutes, there was no sign of them. They can confirm that Cooper had jumped out of the plane with the money strapped to him via a parachute in the pitch-black night. And since that day, Cooper was never seen again. It's not clear whether he made it to Mexico or not, and no evidence shows whether he survived or not. Some of the money with the same serial numbers given to him was found in Washington, but that's the only trace of him. Either he made it back to Washington, or the money was found somewhere and spent by the finder of the loot. If he's around today, then he'd be in his mid-90s, which equally means he might not be around today. It's not like it was a complete dead end. Throughout the years, many people became obsessed with D.B. Cooper, that they came to the authorities to claim they were the ones who did it. But they were just seeking attention. Who wouldn't want to be the hero in this? The authorities even believed he could have been Canadian, since Cooper was named after a comic book hero who used to jump out of planes to escape danger. So many theories popped out of thin air, but nothing was conclusive. There was a famous sketch of Cooper, but it's hard to truly identify the man. Cooper became a celebrity and a hero to some. Some people even launched a Cooper Con, where fans of the Mystery Man would meet up together and share their theories and so-called evidence of his presence. The truth is, we still don't know. In 2016, the authorities decided not to pursue D.B. Cooper anymore. They claimed it was too time-consuming and one of the most exhaustive investigations in their entire history. All we know is that this incident changed the entire way we approach air travel forever.
Is the Big Apple getting a little too heavy for its own good? A recent study revealed that New York City is sinking. And get this, it's all because of those towering skyscrapers. Apparently, the whole event is called subsidence, which is when the Earth's surface settles bit by bit, or suddenly sinks. Soft sediments shifting and the weight of the city itself are the culprits behind this sinking sensation. Now, don't get too alarmed. The study found that New York is sinking at a rate of 0.04 to 0.07 inches per year. Sure, that doesn't sound like much, but there are parts of the city that are sinking even faster than that. This sinking situation could cause some trouble for the city, especially since it's already pretty low-lying and home to over 8 million people. So it's important that local authorities come up with some strategies to tackle the growing flood risk and rising sea levels. Although, I'm not sure building giant seawalls is the way to go. We might need to get a little more creative than that. Geologists want to make sure we're all aware that building more high-rises near the coast, rivers, or lakes could contribute to future flood risks. So we really need to think twice before we start constructing skyscrapers left and right. In recent studies, scientists calculated the total mass of all the buildings in New York City, over 1 million of them, and it adds up to a whopping 1.68 trillion pounds. Talk about a heavy load. Now, they didn't include the weight of the roads, sidewalks, bridges, and other paved areas, so you can only imagine how much more weight is added to the city. But hey, even with these limitations, the researchers did a pretty good job of accounting for the complex geology beneath New York, including the sand, silt, clay deposits, and good old bedrock. They found out that certain types of soil, like clay and artificial fill, are more prone to subsidence. On the other hand, bedrock stays pretty firm and keeps those skyscrapers in place. So at least we don't have to worry about the Empire State Building taking a dive anytime soon. Comparing their fancy models with satellite data, the researchers created a map of the city showing where the sinking is happening. And guess what? The increased urbanization and all that groundwater pumping and draining are only making things worse. It's high time we start protecting our resources, don't you think? I wouldn't start packing my bags just yet. New York isn't the only sinking city out there, you know. Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, is facing some serious sinking action too. In fact, parts of it could be underwater by 2050. That's like a real-life Atlantis situation. Over 30 million people in Jakarta are now deciding if they should relocate the entire city. If there's a city out there we should worry about sinking, that's Venice for sure. But why is it so eager to take a dive, you might ask? Well, let me tell you the complex truth. You see, Venice decided to set up shop on a marshy lagoon with shoddy foundations. As time went by, the ground underneath just couldn't hold it together. and started compacting like a squished marshmallow. On top of that, the city's been slurping up groundwater like it's going out of style or something. The cherry on top of this mushy cake is that the sea levels have also been slowly rising. And guess what? Those sneaky plate tectonics are having a laugh by shoving the Adriatic plate under the Apennine Mountains, giving Venice an extra push downward. Someone had the bright idea to stop pumping groundwater, thinking they could stop the sinking shenanigans. But hold your gondolas. A new study revealed that the sinking hasn't completely stopped, just slowed down a bit. It turns out the whole area is tilting ever so slightly to the east, with Venice perched on the slightly higher end. You must be wondering how much Venice sinks in a year, right? Brace yourself for this shocking revelation. It's sinking at a rate of about 0.04 to 0.07 inches a year, similar to New York. At this pace, in the next 20 years, it could sink a whopping 3 inches below sea level. To avoid turning into a Venetian fishbowl, locals are frantically building special barriers to keep the water from crashing into the lagoon. But don't hold your breath, because this project has had more delays than you'd expect. Oh, and have you noticed that charming old-style vibe in Venice? It's not just because they're fans of the vintage look. Those salty waters have been wreaking havoc on the buildings, thanks to the water levels constantly breaching the original damp proofing. Now the water's cozying up to the masonry, and the ground floors of many apartments are no longer safe enough to live in. Now, when will Venice take a dive into the abyss? It's hard to say for sure. Subsidence and rising sea levels are as slow and unpredictable as a turtle in a marathon. But experts have playfully warned that if things continue as they are, Venice could be doing the backstroke beneath the waves by 2100. Fear not, though. They're doing their best to protect this floating gem of history and culture from becoming a Hollywood disaster flick. So don't cancel that Venice day trip just yet. New Orleans has a peculiar watery situation going on too. You see, this lively place was initially built just a smidge above sea level, and now it's gradually sinking. Back in the day, when an area of the city called the French Quarter was just popping up, folks had to make do with what they had. They scored the best land they could find, but it was only about 10 feet above sea level. And let's not forget, the rest of the city is as flat as a pancake, with the areas around the French Quarter being just a hair lower. Now, even though they knew they were up against some soggy odds, the resourceful New Orleans residents did their best to elevate their houses above the flood-prone land they chose as their home. There's more. The ground beneath New Orleans is as wobbly as a plate of Jell-O. Architects had to keep things short and sweet because they feared the soil couldn't handle the weight of taller structures. They played it safe, sticking to 2 or 2.5 stories. Here's where it gets interesting. The city installed a fancy drainage system in the 1900s, thinking it would solve their water woes. And while it did help with the marshes and all, it inadvertently sucked the life out of the soil. Yep, the ground was left high and dry, without enough sediment and water to keep it steady. As a result, those former marshes sank as if they were in a quicksand competition. By the 1930s, things got even more topsy-turvy. 1/3 of the city was below sea level, and by the time Hurricane Katrina made its grand entrance, that number skyrocketed to around 50%. Oh, and here's the icing on the cake. Sea levels decided to join the party, rising faster than a helium balloon. So now, not only is New Orleans sinking, but the surrounding area is also at various degrees below sea level. So what can we do about all these sinking cities? Well, for instance, we could manage our water consumption a bit better. We can't just keep sucking groundwater out of the earth like there's no tomorrow. We've got to find new ways to quench our urban centers' thirst. Think about it. we could purify surface waters, or even turn salty seawater into a sweet solution. Of course, we'll need a boatload of energy to make it all work. Speaking of great urban water management, let me tell you about a town in Denmark called Nye. These guys have got it all figured out. They collect rainwater and use it to supply their toilets and washing machines. Talk about resourcefulness. Now that's what I call a splash of genius.
The authorities in a town in northwestern Poland decided to build an observation tower in a public park. Nothing special about that, right? It wasn't until a local archaeologist started digging. It seemed that he had found remains of a fort, but not just any fort. The legendary Jomsborg, or as people also call it, the Viking medieval New York. It's not unusual for Viking finds to pop up in this area. Archaeologists have suspected for a long time that the Polish island near Germany could be the site of the legendary city. And the locals believe in this too. Every year they hold the continent's biggest Viking festival there. People dress up and reenact the Vikings' way of life. The time period I'm talking about is the 10th century. Scholars believe Jomsborg thrived back then, if it was even real. And that's a big if. The mystery has been going on for more than half a millennium. The two most important questions troubling historians are whether the Viking stronghold was real and where it was located. The first historical records that mention the town can be traced back to the 12th century. Recently, a golden disc appeared in Sweden. It contained the names of Jomsborg and Harold Bluetooth. Does the man's last name sound familiar? That's because the Bluetooth technology we use today was named after him. He was a Danish king who apparently ruled over Jomsborg as well, and historians know he lived in the 10th century, right around the time the Viking legendary city reached its peak. All the historical sources we have lack one thing: the city's exact location. Ancient texts describe Jomsborg as a vibrant trading post that grew around a fortress. It had thousands of residents and a pier for ships to dock. This settlement should be somewhere along the southern coast of the Baltic Sea. Just the Polish section of the coastline is more than 4 times longer than the Grand Canyon. The city could be anywhere within the medieval Wendland. Today, this region is split between Germany and Poland, and it's called Pomerania. Luckily for archaeology buffs, there are clues. The Polish city with the newly discovered fort lies near a lagoon. According to ancient sources, the legendary city had room for hundreds of ships. Sagas put the total number of vessels at 360. These are Old Norse epics in prose. A lagoon is the perfect place to moor a large fleet. The waters here are calm. There are no big waves like in the open sea. Speaking of the sea, some historians believe that the city now lies underwater. According to them, the site was located off the northwest coast of Eustom Island. Today, this area is submerged under the Baltic Sea. Let's say Jomsborg really existed. Who lived there? The name of the inhabitants is not very imaginative: Jomsvikings. These people are just as mysterious as their fabled city. They are mentioned in sagas and legends. And there are a couple of rune stones, those are raised stones with runic letters, that mention battles they took part in. Runes were a writing system used by Germanic peoples, including the Vikings, before they adopted the Latin script. And that's pretty much it. There's no hard archaeological evidence that would prove Jomsvikings ever existed. If these myths and legends turn out to be true, then Jomsborg really resembled New York. All nationalities with historical ties to the region lived there: Germans, Slavs, and Vikings. Now keep in mind that a Viking wasn't a nationality but more of a profession. The hotspot of Viking activity was present-day Sweden and Denmark. A lot of Vikings had Scandinavian origins, but not all of them. In terms of genes, they were a mixed bunch. Scientists even found evidence that some Vikings came from southern Europe, but none of them wore those helmets with horns. We owe that image to 19th century operas. The real Vikings had simple iron helmets with a prominent nose guard. The Jomsvikings were sort of a brotherhood, and in any tight-knit community, members had to obey certain rules. One of them stated that you had to be brave. This meant that if your opponent is not bigger than you and didn't have better fighting tools, you weren't allowed to flee the scene. Sounds a bit far-fetched, but this was an actual Viking rule of conduct. Also, Vikings could leave the city for only 3 days. Any longer, absence required permission from the elders, and they wouldn't allow you to have a conflict with anyone from the Brotherhood. Forgive and forget seemed to have been the Jomsvikings' motto. These rules sound fair, but Jomsborg didn't last long. It only existed for some 85 years. That's the length of the average lifespan in the European Union today. Basically, one human generation. In fact, the whole Viking Age lasted shortly, just over 2 centuries in total. But this was long enough to create the legend of the Norsemen. They are all over our popular culture. There was a TV show, Vikings, and the movie, The Northman. Even the animated movie How to Train Your Dragon had a little Viking as the main hero. And most of them mention a place from Norse mythology, Valhalla. Now, if Jomsborg is semi-legendary, Valhalla is 100% fiction. It is the Hall of Fallen Warriors. Remember how the Jomsvikings had to honor a code of behavior? They did so in the hope of earning their place in Valhalla. This was a splendid place. The people there feast on boar meat every day, under a roof made of shields. Every Viking's dream, right? That's not all. They get into scrimmages with each other on a daily basis. But what exactly motivated the Vikings to take up a life of seafaring? There is no simple answer, but this seems to be a rags-to-riches story. Scandinavian people traded fur with other European nations. From them, they found out about the riches that lay to the south of their homeland. And they also knew that European leaders didn't always get along well with each other. So why not take advantage of this and earn extra cash on the side? The Vikings' motivation seems pretty modern. The very first raid was carried out by Norwegian Vikings. They sailed across the North Sea to northeast England. Europeans were shocked by the boldness of these raiders from the north. The Viking Age was about to begin. The Norsemen soon realized that European nations were ready to pay a hefty sum to avoid their visits. At the beginning of the 11th century, the English paid the Vikings more than $300,000 in today's money to leave them alone. There was even a special word for this tax. The influx of all this wealth made the Vikings' appetite only grow bigger. But this was all about to change in 1066, possibly the most important date in English history. That year, the last great Viking king went to England. However, he couldn't find victory at Stamford Bridge. Yes, the place where the Chelsea Football Club plays its matches today. After the Norwegian king lost, the number of raids decreased. The Europeans were better equipped to defend themselves. The Viking Age slowly came to an end. But this didn't mean that the Vikings were gone forever. They stayed in Iceland for 400 years. The island was largely uninhabited before they came in the 9th century. And in England, the Vikings left their trace in place names. Every town that ends in "by" was first settled by these Scandinavians. There are around 2,000 place names across Great Britain and Ireland that can be linked to the Vikings. And can you guess which part of France has the most Viking-related toponyms? The name says it all: Normandy. The mouth of the River Seine is where most Danish Vikings settled in the 9th century. From there, they sent several raiding parties to Paris itself.
Wow, looky here. It's New York City, the Big Apple, the city that never sleeps. Hong Kong on the Hudson, the greatest city in the world. New York, New York, the city so nice they named it twice. All right, I'll stop. You thought you knew this city so well, but underneath all that glitz and glamour is a facade, literally. New York is populated with some of the most iconic urban buildings in the world and home to some of the most unique and famous towers. Who would have known that New York was a front for fake buildings? And the cool thing is that there are plenty to search for. Okay, I'm adding that to my bucket list. So the question is, why do they put these fake buildings all over New York? The city is one of the most vibrant places in the world and requires many infrastructures to keep the city in motion. That means having many industrial structures and buildings in every major district. New York is charming for the design and the buildings. Imagine having industrial structures right next to your favorite pizza parlor or hot dog stand. The designers thought ahead and decided to disguise those industrial infrastructures as fake buildings. They blend with the city so well that they don't stand out. They look like your good old apartment or housing unit with a front door, real-life windows, and even charming balconies where people would hang out. The only thing is that there's nothing behind the facade and no one is allowed inside. So, where in the world can you find these fake buildings? For starters, one of the most popular fake buildings is in Brooklyn. At 58 Joralemon Street, you can find a very typical neighborhood. But between the buildings stands a brick building with a slightly deeper shade than the rest. It has bright open windows that blend in with the rest of the buildings in the neighborhood, except that they're blacked out. At first glance, you might not think of it as anything, but if you pay close attention, the building looks like a glitch from a video game. It was built in 1847, way before New York was considered glamorous. Originally, it was meant to be a regular building, but in 1908, they converted it into a fake building. Don't think you can just try to break in. Even if you could, it's pointless, because it's part of a ventilation fan for the subway. It also serves as an emergency exit for some of the surrounding buildings. Actually, throughout New York, many fake buildings exist to disguise the subway vents for the smoke to escape. All the way to 415 Bruckner Boulevard, the Bronx, this townhouse was designed by the Switzer Group, which is an interior architect company. It's not as charming as the one at 58 Joralemon Street, but it serves a similar purpose: to hide an electric substation for New York's utility company. The city needs these substations to reduce the high-voltage electricity to a lower voltage so it can be distributed locally. Having a building like this popping out of the middle of your neighborhood isn't exactly the smartest way to attract people to the Bronx. That's why the fake townhouse facade is the perfect camouflage. Now, some of these fake buildings don't really hit the mark and stick out like a sore thumb. The people of Manhattan describe the Mulberry Square infrastructure as a complete clunker. After plenty of redesigns and back to the drawing board meetings, the result is still not pretty. The locals compare it to a concrete box. They created windows without glass, which doesn't allow the building to blend in with the rest of the neighborhood. But it beats a typical subway ventilation plant either way. There are just so many places to visit and cross off your bucket list. But if you live in China, you can literally stay in the country and visit many iconic cities around the world. The replica cities began when the Chinese economy started booming in the early 90s. They wanted the lifestyle of the rich and famous without wanting to leave their country. They can be comfortable eating their local food and get the feeling of being abroad. The Chinese province of Guangdong has an identical copy of the historical Australian alpine village Hallstatt. The real Hallstatt is centuries old and one of the most charming places to discover. The local people of Hallstatt also had no idea that their home was being built in China. Some people thought that this was controversial, probably because it cost around $940 million to build it. Paris is undoubtedly one of the most charming cities you could ever visit. Its rich history and vibrant culture are enough to catch the first plane to go there. For residents of Tianducheng, that's something they can do anytime they want. The city is also known as Sky City and has a replica of the Eiffel Tower that looks eerily like the iconic one in Paris and built buildings to match the city's visual charm. One of the main things that will break the charm is the farmland surrounding the city. There's barely anyone there, and the streets are always empty, very un-Paris-like. Still, you can find some nice fountains and statues scattered along the streets to give it some spirit. There's laundry hung everywhere, even on the trees. The picturesque fountains are dry and many apartments are empty. Only a few stores are open for business. Even though this looks like a fake city, it's quite real. Some people live here because it's more affordable than other places. 2 hours away from this town is another version of Paris's Pont Alexandre III and a carbon copy of London's Tower Bridge, but with 4 towers instead of 2. Hey, such a bargain! You can also visit the closest thing to Italy, but this time you can go shopping. Florentia Village is an outlet mall that offers an array of shops to lose yourself. The good thing is that this was built by an Italian developer to capture the essence of an Italian village. It has fountains, canals, and mosaics for proper aesthetics. It began in 2011 and has more than 200 shops with many Italian brands and British, US, and Chinese brands as well. The place is so popular that it gets between 10,000 and 25,000 visitors per day. China also has other replica towns that put you in a mini Manhattan called the Yujiapu Financial District. The developer's goal was to make this place the financial center of the world. It was complete with the right landmarks, like the Rockefeller and Lincoln Centers, but the project was halted in 2019, leaving it mainly empty. You can find a typical English town with cobbled streets, Victorian homes, and restaurants that make Thames Town. This place was meant to recreate a European lifestyle fantasy without leaving Shanghai. China also has a Dutch town that has some elements of Amsterdam with windmills and famous canals. They even decided to copy some of the landmarks, like the Netherlands Maritime Museum. Here's a bonus story of Lebanon's thinnest building built out of a dispute. It's the story of two brothers who both inherited unequal plots of land. One of the brothers happened to get a very thin plot of land and couldn't help but be jealous of his brother's nice plot of land. He wasn't pleased. Both of the lands overlooked the Mediterranean Sea in a lively neighborhood of Beirut. So it's no wonder that both brothers couldn't agree on how they should develop their lands. It was obvious that the brother with the most land could build a proper building. The other brother had to improvise. He decided to obstruct his brother's property by constructing a thin building enough to only fit 14 feet at its widest and 2 feet at its most narrow. It was constructed in 1954, and the locals of the area know it as the Grudge. The crazy thing is that the place was once habitable with many visitors enjoying their stay. It's not easy to live there, but it's part of living the experience. The building is still standing, but is empty. So, since 2000, the world has been hit with more than 1,700 earthquakes with magnitude greater than 5. Many happened around the Ring of Fire, located around the Pacific Ocean. In North America, the biggest threat is the San Andreas fault line, which can create an earthquake of a magnitude higher than any other, earning it the spine-tingling nickname, the Big One. The potential destruction of California is a terrifying prospect that could have unimaginable consequences. But the Big One is just the beginning of what's to come. Bad news! Scientists have predicted an earth-shattering event that will occur in 2030. Like it or not, there's a 70% chance that we'll experience the Big One, and it will be an earthquake with a magnitude of 6.7. The San Andreas fault line will cause the Big One, but what is scary is that we can't predict it. On the other hand, a massive earthquake occurs every 100 years. This means there's always time to prepare for a natural disaster. If we traveled back in time, we'd see a few significant earthquakes like the ones that wiped out San Francisco and Fort Tejon. Buildings made a long time ago are not quake-proof. They will collapse. Even if they survive, you should not enter them. But buildings are not the most dangerous part. You should watch out for electrical lines and gas pipes. Your hill house might be lovely, but it is extremely unsafe. During quakes, the hill can turn into a massive landslide that will destroy everything in its path. Say goodbye to road trips because all the roads will be ruined. You should have some spare water and food since you won't be able to go to the supermarket. This disaster won't be cheap. It will cost the U.S. around $200 billion to recover from the quake. At least the earthquake will not trigger tsunamis. But there's something it can cause more damage than the Big One. The notorious Cascadia subduction zones start in California and ends up all the way in Vancouver, Canada. The San Andreas fault line is nothing compared to this zone. It can wipe the whole coast off the face of the Earth, an example of hyperbole. Subduction zones are tectonic plates forced to be one under the other and constantly pulling apart. One is called the North American Plate and the other is the Juan de Fuca Plate. Zones like these are not to be messed with, since they are terrifying hotspots for earthquake activity and extremely dangerous because they cause massive underwater quakes. But they are underwater, so what can they do to us? Well, they can cause giant tsunamis, flooding cities, and destroying the coastline. Right now, the most active zone is the Ring of Fire. The Cascadia zone might be less active, but it is like a sleeping beast that can wake up and destroy everything in its path, causing a groundbreaking earthquake. The last time all this stress was released was in the year 1700. Unlike the San Andreas quake, this one will cause massive tsunamis and much bigger shocks. Let's hope you'll be camping in an open field at that time, because most buildings and bridges will likely be destroyed. Also, be ready for the aftershocks, as they'll be devastating. Nature won't be spared either. Landslides will change animals' habitats. Even our homes will be changed forever. Luckily, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and scientists are doing everything they can to ensure our safety. New rules are implemented. Every new building must be able to withstand massive shocks. They're developing modern warning systems, and every new infrastructure must follow strict quake-proof guidelines. The Juan de Fuca and the North American plates are locked together, but they won't stay like that forever. When they unlock, get ready for a massive shake. The closer you are to the epicenter, the more damage you'll experience. But even if you are lucky to be far away, you may still feel the ground shaking for some time. Now, if we compare the Cascadia subduction zone and the San Andreas Fault, we'll see how much more dangerous the Cascadia zone is. In 1994, there was an enormous 6.7 magnitude earthquake in the Northridge area, close to the San Andreas Fault. Sadly, many people didn't make it, and some were injured. Back then, buildings were not strong and earthquake-proof, and many of them were damaged. The Cascadia subduction zone can potentially cause a magnitude 9 earthquake. A magnitude 6 quake has the power of around 44 million pounds of dynamite, but a magnitude 9 has the power of 44 trillion pounds of dynamite. The strongest ever recorded quake was in Chile. Its magnitude measured 9.5, and it destroyed most everything. So let's say you've survived the quake, but the struggle is far from over. Soon after, a massive tsunami will strike, with waves that might reach up to 100 feet in some areas. That's so unlike the San Andreas earthquake, which can't produce any significant waves. So say goodbye to your beautiful garden, since salt water will destroy trees and plants, changing the environment for a period of time. The only positive thing will be you won't need Halloween decorations, because all those dried-out trees will resemble a ghost forest. The combination of waves, quakes, and the sheer size of the area will make this natural disaster much more dangerous than any caused by the San Andreas Fault or the so-called Big One. A quake similar to this happened around 300 years ago. Many more have been recorded in the past 3,500 years, proving that they continually occur every 400 to 600 years. So, technically, we have around 100 to 300 years before the next big one hits. We still have no idea how exactly the Cascadia subduction zone works, because we discovered it in 1970. This zone is super scary because it can cause big earthquakes. It was found by accident when researchers studied the Ring of Fire. They wanted to know if this area had caused any trouble in the past years, and the proof was under their noses. In Washington, there is a horror forest where nothing has been growing for years. When researchers tested the soil, they found a tremendous amount of salt. They put 2 and 2 together and concluded that a massive tsunami had been the reason. Experts still didn't know when the forest was destroyed. But Japan kept records of a gigantic earthquake that had a similar effect. It was the one that happened in the year 1700. There is a 1 in 3 chance that the next one will occur in 2050. You must know how to survive the Canadian earthquakes and make it out unscathed, so listen carefully. Those who live in this area have almost no experience with earthquakes like this one. Surviving the quake is relatively easy, but the tsunami coming afterwards is the real danger. After the shake, find the highest ground and go there. Only bring the essentials, like food and water. Yeah, leave your baseball card collection at home. After the first hit, don't try to go down. Seismologists say that most likely there will be a few more waves, and they have proven this. On the 22nd of May, 1960, seismologist Jerry Eston and his 4 friends went to Hawaii to see an expected tsunami that was to happen around midnight. They set up their gear on Wailuku Bridge with an escape route planned. This bridge had been destroyed in the previous tsunami, but the new one was much taller and better. After midnight, the water was 4 feet above the average level. The second wave hit a half hour after midnight, and the water rose another 9 feet by 1 a.m. The water started going down and dropped by 7 feet, but the horror was far from over. Next, they saw a wave that was around 20 feet tall. This shows us that tsunamis are unpredictable, and we should listen to experts to stay safe. You come to sunny California and go for a hike in the San Lucia Mountains. There, you have a strange, unpleasant feeling, as if someone's watching you. You look around but don't see a single soul. That's when you glance at the tops of distant mountains in front of you and your heart skips a beat. Up on the peaks, you can see the outline of a giant humanoid figure, arms stretched out with a magnificent full rainbow circling it. This mysterious figure is dressed in all black. You can't make out any facial expressions or detail, but you can see it moving. Then it vanishes right before your eyes. Congrats! You've just witnessed the Dark Watchers, a phenomenon that's been terrifying hikers in the California mountains for over 300 years. Even now, scientists can't give an exact explanation for this mysterious appearance. What we do know is it's completely natural, probably. One theory claims that there are no silhouettes at all. The human brain just thinks up images created by shadows the clouds cast on the mountains. Over the centuries, people share stories about this legend, and their minds begin to show it, building recognizable objects. The same can happen to you, like when you see the contours of a human face on a burnt piece of toast or the shape of a dog in a passing cloud. The most accepted scientific explanation is what's called a Bakken specter. It's when sunlight gets bent by drops of fog or clouds. That explains the rainbow surrounding these figures. As for the shadow, it's only your own being stretched and projected on the mountains before you. After all, these figures usually show up when the sun is behind the witness. Natural or not, the vanishing mysterious figures scared the wits out of you. So we head to Antarctica. Snow, ice, and more blinding sun. Yep, it's a desert too. The light is almost blinding. You squint and off in the distance, you see something red sticking out from all the surrounding endless white. As you get closer, you realize it's a waterfall, an ominous red cascade flowing from the glacier. Splashes fly in all directions and stain the white snow. Don't worry, these so-called blood falls are nothing of the sort. Millions of years ago, hey, I wasn't around then, a glacier formed over a pond and blocked access to sunlight, heat, and oxygen. Then the pond managed to break through the glacier with a little trickle of water. When such salty waters with high levels of iron meets oxygen, it creates that scarlet rust color. This is the only waterfall of its kind in the world. As soon as you come to the Namib Desert, you immediately notice something very strange. Sprinkled among the dry grasslands are almost perfect circles of dirt where nothing grows. These massive polka dots are called fairy circles, and, you guessed it, nobody really knows what causes them. The likely culprit is termites eating the grass around their underground colony. That could also explain the circles' differing sizes. The bugs continue to eat as the colony expands outwards, but they stop before they encroach on a neighboring colony. Well, that's neighborly. The patches where you do see grass show a sort of boundary separating different termite populations. So goes the theory. Heading down to Australia's Lake Hillier. Your eyes don't deceive you. Yes, that lake is bubblegum pink and is perfectly safe to swim in. The giant pink puddle is a salt lake, and it's not the only one of its kind in the world. Salt lakes are pink because of a kind of algae and other microorganisms living in them. They produce a red pigment to protect themselves from the sun. What's unique about Lake Hillier, though, is the water is still pink even if you scoop it up into a glass, and it remains bright pink all year round. The same can't be said about other pink lakes. Southeast Asia. You see a tree that looks as if someone poured paint all over it. But the rainbow eucalyptus was painted by nature. Its unusual bark changes colors over time, like a kaleidoscope. It starts off as a bright green shade, then red, orange, purple, and finally brown. Then the colorful cycle starts again. Blood rain looks more terrifying than any horror movie, but in reality, there's nothing strange or unnatural about this weather phenomenon. People have known about such scarlet-tinted rains since the times of ancient Rome. Sometimes, powerful winds lift red dust into the atmosphere and carry it far, far away, to another galaxy. In the end, this dust gets mixed with clouds, which colors the rain. By the way, dust from coal mines can make the rain black. Pollen is responsible for yellow rains, and some other kinds of dust can turn rainwater white. Back in 2009, people in Ishikawa, Japan saw a kind of rain no one's ever seen before. It was raining tadpoles. The first reason was that the wind that day was so strong it lifted and carried all those tadpoles away in no time. The second possible reason was that big birds such as gulls just dropped them while they were flying to their nests. Some scientists believe these creatures were hauled off the ground by a waterspout and rained down later. By the way, that day people found not only tadpoles, but also frogs and fish instead of puddles. And yep, it can be raining worms too. Some people claim they've seen snake rains. Yikes! And instead of common raindrops, people have watched translucent jelly-like blobs falling down from the skies. Now, Australian spiders are notorious, and to frighten people, they've even learned how to rain. Spider rains are a pretty common thing in Australia because of ballooning. They climb up trees, then spin strands of silk, and that's why the wind can carry them away. Usually people don't notice it, but when it's wet, hundreds of spiders climb up to more desirable places. People say that when it rains or snows, it's possible to see spiders literally drift down on those webs as if they were balloons. If you ever travel to the Mekong River, you'll probably have a chance to see glowing balls rising up from the water and beelining straight into the air. The locals call these the Naga fireballs. Sizes may vary, so these reddish balls can be as tiny as a cherry and as large as a watermelon. During the night, you can see dozens and sometimes even thousands of fireballs. Scientists don't have any solid explanation why it happens, but it's probably flammable gas released by the marshy environment. Still, a local superstition claims it's all because of a giant serpent living in the Mekong. Now, shelf clouds look like something from a sci-fi movie. They form when warm and moist air gets caught in a thunderstorm updraft. These ominous clouds most often mean a storm is coming. Breathtaking rainbow clouds appear on top of cotton-like puffy clouds after thunderstorms. The puffy clouds are low-altitude ones. When the water vapor they contain condenses, the resulting droplets act like prisms. This forms multicolored caps over the clouds. Morning glory clouds are extremely rare. They look like massive tubes stretching across the sky. Most researchers agree that these clouds appear when an updraft squeezes through the cloud. This creates the signature rolling appearance. The cool air at the back of the cloud makes it sink downward. The best, but not the only place to see morning glory is Australia's Gulf of Carpentaria. If you decide to travel there to see these clouds, choose a period from late September or October to early November. Huge white lumps over your head are called mammatus clouds. They make you believe the sky is falling. Most clouds form when air rises in the atmosphere, but not mammatus ones. They appear when moist and cool air goes down and mixes with dry air. The result? Unique puffed rice clouds. By the way, if you spot this phenomenon, bad weather is just around the corner. Whoa, mama! If you get to the bottom of the Caribbean just off the coast of Cuba, you'll see circular columns, paved floors, symmetrical stone structures. That's what the Cuban underwater city looks like. Why was a large city abandoned? Lots of people believe the ruins once belonged to a long-forgotten civilization. But scientists have their doubts. They claim the lost city is nothing but a natural phenomenon that appeared about 5 million years ago. Such disc and donut structures often occur around the areas of the seafloor where natural gases break free. Those who have ever heard an annoying sound a kettle makes when the water is boiling can imagine what the whistle sounds like. Even though this noise isn't as blood-curdling as some other unexplained sounds, it doesn't make the whistle any less mysterious. It's incredibly elusive. In 1997, only one underwater microphone was able to pick it up. At that time, researchers didn't manage to pinpoint the source of the noise. The most likely cause of the unusual sound is the eruption of one of the submarine volcanoes. But once again, there's not enough proof to make sure.
You rub your eyes, trying to make sense of everything. Perfect circular holes in the bottom of the ocean floor off the coast of Big Sur in California. You have no idea how this happened, even though you're a marine biologist who's been practicing it for years. You go through some of the old records and find out that these holes have been around since the 90s. In 1999, a ship-mounted sonar conducted a survey and found 5,200 of these pockmarks, or large holes over 500 square miles, on the ocean floor. They look like moon craters underwater. You contact your team and get the robot ready to go down and explore the scene and bring back a few samples. You and the team drive to the coast and hop on the boat. You're sitting inside controlling the robot with a joystick. Your teammate sets the robot in the water and drives it down. Everything seems normal near the surface, but as the robot goes lower, the pockmarks start appearing. A bunch of boats swift past you, making you lose your balance and focus. The robot turns on the flashlight so you can see better. But as it goes lower, the resolution is less crisp. It almost reaches the bottom, and the holes are smooth and nearly perfect circular shapes. Some of these holes that were visible in the sonar reading measure more than 30 feet across and 15 feet deep. You show the rest of your teammates the images, and they're shocked. The robot continues swimming, but there appear to be more holes all around. Many of them are too small for the scanner to capture from above. These microdepressions are steep and have sort of tails going in a certain direction. It's possible that the currents underwater played a role in their shape. Everywhere the robot swims, there are new holes all around. After a couple of hours, the robot goes back to the boat with some samples. You take them back to the lab and study them. The robot clearly captures images of human trash, but the samples don't indicate anything alarming for now. Despite the fact that 1/3 of the pockets are filled with trash, there's still no explanation of how they were formed. It's late at night and the rest of your team heads back home. You're passing out in the lab, still trying to find some answers. You wake up the next day, and while cooking breakfast, you get this idea that maybe these holes are gases venting out, which could be harmful to marine life. You quickly get the robot and sail out to the ocean once more. This time, you didn't even think about calling your teammates. You place the robot in the water and get behind the screen to control it. The robot descends to the bottom of the ocean and does a survey. So far, the holes still seem to be covered with trash. But some of the holes have marine life dwelling inside, like fish and seaweed. After much scanning, it doesn't look like they're producing any bubbles, which means there aren't any gases venting out, but you're determined to find them. After a while, you reach one of those large pockmarks, and the robot starts scanning around. You find some bubbles coming from a source, but the robot can't reach it. It swims around trying to find a spot, but nothing. You bring the robot back to the lab and work on it. You attach some mechanical arms on it that can lift things and move them. You bring the robot back down to the same spot, but the bubbles aren't as frequent as before. You use the arms to move some of the trash and find out that the bubbles are being produced by a group of crabs chilling next to a pile of plastic. Bingo! The bad news is, you still don't have a clue why the microdepressions and pockmarks exist. As you try to control the robot to go back to the surface, an octopus wraps its tentacles around it, pulling the robot down. You struggle with the controls and push it to maximum power, but the suctions of the octopus are too strong to break off. It's a game of tug-of-war with the octopus and your robot. It takes the robot under a pile of trash, thinking it's lunch. But you use the arms to maneuver the robot out and swim back to the surface. You go back to the lab even more confused. The robot has collected more samples for you to study. Your eye is glued to your microscope, trying to figure out what's going on, but nothing. You decide to do a carbon dating test to determine how old these holes are. After a while, you check out the results and are even more stunned than before. They show that the holes are around 400,000 years old, so it's likely that human trash wasn't the cause for all this. You pull many all-nighters trying to figure out the truth. You gather your team once more and hold a small press conference about this. You claim that this may be something we should be extremely worried about, but you still can't tell them more than what you know. With all the brain work put together, you find out that the large pockmarks haven't changed or been active for more than 50,000 years. The newer holes were most likely created by human trash settling in the bottom of the ocean floor. The marine life gathered some of this trash like plastics and discarded fishing gear and created homes for themselves. This is why around 4,500 of the holes are newer and have trash in them. But it still doesn't answer why the holes appeared in the first place. You're back to square one. The only way to see what's really going on is to clear up the trash from underwater and study them. The story makes headlines in the local community and catches the attention of a cleanup crew. You organize a trip to the ocean and begin the extraction of all the trash. Many cleanup boats arrive and everyone drops down a net to collect the trash. You send down the robot once more to make sure the nets are hitting the right spot. As most of the trash is being collected, many marine life animals scramble and try to find a way to escape. Everyone makes sure not to hurt them. After a couple of weeks, all the holes are cleared up from the trash. You do another sonar scan from the surface and can see the holes clearer than before. But you still don't have an answer for this. You do some more research trying to see if any other holes appeared around the world. On the other side of the country is a mysterious blue hole off of Florida's Gulf Coast. You catch the nearest flight to Florida and make an appointment with the scientists in charge of the expedition. Blue holes are underwater sinkholes that open below the seabed. Just like on the surface, the underwater world also has sinkholes. This one is called the Green Banana and is 150 feet below, and the hole is 435 feet deep. You dive with some special gear with the rest of the team to a barren ocean floor, and the hole is right there in front of you, looking like an oasis in the desert. You and the rest of the scientists are surprised by the diverse marine life dwelling within. Some sea turtles swim past you, and even sharks. These ones don't harm humans. Halfway through, you reach a narrow path, which makes it difficult for humans to pass through. But everyone is careful. There are corals, sponges, mollusks around the corner. You collect some samples and go back to the lab. Blue holes in general are richer in nutrients than barren lands and host plenty of unique marine life. They're quite common and don't pose any sort of threat to anyone. After making the connections, you don't think the holes off the coast of California have anything to do with blue holes. The mystery goes on.
You're standing on a beach in Hawaii, warm breeze on your face, toes in the sand, a volcano smoldering in the distance. But this fairy tale won't last long as the whole island is sinking into the ocean, 40 times faster than the scientists previously expected. Some parts of the island could be underwater by 2050. Uh-oh. To understand why it's all happening, we have to go way back in time, millions of years ago, to see where it all started, deep under the Pacific Ocean. Now, unlike most volcanoes, which usually form along the edges of tectonic plates, the Hawaiian Islands popped into existence smack in the middle of one. That's because of something geologists call a hotspot. The Earth's mantle is like a giant pot of thick, bubbling stew. In a few places, heat builds up so intensely that molten rock, magma, punches straight through the Earth's crust. It's like turning up the heat under one part of a stew pot until it boils over. That upwelling of magma is the hotspot. As magma reaches the surface, it erupts as lava. When the lava cools and hardens, it forms land. When enough of it piles up over the thousands or even millions of years, an island forms. The hotspot doesn't move and stays rooted deep in the mantle. But the Pacific Plate, the giant chunk of Earth's crust that Hawaii rides on, is always slowly drifting to the northwest. So, every few million years, a new volcano forms over the hotspot and the old one gets carried away. Thanks to all this, a chain of islands formed, each one a little older and more worn down than the last. If you look at a map, you can trace this volcanic breadcrumb trail across the Pacific. It stretches all the way from the Big Island in the southeast, which is the youngest, up through Maui, Oahu, and Kauai, and into the sea as a chain of underwater mountains called the Emperor Seamounts. The Big Island is still growing today, thanks to active volcanoes like Kilauea and Mauna Loa. The older islands, like Kauai, are eroding, shrinking, and, sadly, sinking. Oahu is going in the water at the speed of nearly 1/40th of an inch every year. That's about as thick as 10 sheets of printer paper. But certain coastal regions are sinking at 1 inch per year, and that's no joke. This is happening for a few reasons. First, as the islands move away from the hotspot, they cool down. That might sound good in summer, but cooler rock actually shrinks and becomes denser, making the whole island sit lower in the water. Erosion gradually makes the island smaller, and unless there is further volcanic activity or a drop in sea level, the island submerges below the ocean surface at some point. Second, there's the weight of the islands themselves. They're made of solid rock and lava, thousands of cubic miles of it. Over time, their own mass slowly pushes them downward into the soft underlying mantle. And third, there's human activity. The first people who settled here were Polynesian navigators around 1,000 to 1,200 years ago. These navigators used stars, waves, and bird flight patterns to guide them and reach the Hawaiian Islands after weeks at sea. By the time European explorers arrived in the late 18th century, Hawaiians had developed a rich society with chiefs, priests, artisans, farmers, and navigators. The islands were divided into districts, each managed by local leaders, and people lived in harmony with the land. And then it was time of Kamehameha the Great. He unified all the Hawaiian Islands under a single rule for the first time in 1810. The islands were developing in the following centuries, and people needed more flat land near the coast. They started piling in dirt, rocks, and rubble to cover up soggy ground and create new land where there wasn't any before. It worked for a while, and that's how they built roads, neighborhoods, and even airports at some point. But that ground is soft and squishy underneath, and now those areas are sinking much faster than the rest of the island. A new study says that in some parts of Hawaii, this combination of factors could boost the risk of flooding by over 50% by the year 2050. It could force communities to prepare for future floods 50 years sooner than they originally thought. By 2080, flooding is expected to hit Waikiki, downtown Honolulu, and even the local international airport much more often. That could cause some serious problems for everyday life. Hawaii's tourism, beachfront buildings, and natural ecosystems could all be in complete chaos. Over $12.9 billion worth of infrastructure on Oahu alone is in danger from flooding and related damage. That's roads, hotels, homes, and way more. The scientists behind the study are hoping their work can actually help. They want local leaders to use this new data to make smart decisions that reduce future damage and keep people safe. It could help them figure out how bad flooding might get, how strong the buildings and roads need to be, and how to design communities that can survive big changes. Now, Hawaii isn't the only place in the world that's sinking because of its own weight. The weight of all the buildings in New York City is literally pressing it down into the earth. That's more than 1.68 trillion pounds of skyscrapers, apartments, towers, and bridges. That's enough pressure to make the land beneath the city sink by up to 0.08 of an inch per year. Now that may not sound like much, but it adds up quickly, and in some spots, the sinking is happening even faster. Scientists call this slow downward shift subsidence. To figure all this out, researchers use satellite data to look at just how heavy the city is and how fast the ground is moving. Turns out, it's not just the buildings sitting on solid rock. Some parts of the city were built on squishy stuff like old wetlands, soft sediments, or human-made fill, the same as in Hawaii. But even areas built on sturdier ground aren't safe. The study found that layers rich with clay deep underground can keep compressing slowly over time under the weight of heavy buildings. This process is called secondary settlement and can keep happening for decades or even centuries. So even if it looks like everything's fine on the surface, the ground could still be giving way underneath. The scientists behind the research say this isn't just a New York problem. Cities around the world are expanding fast, and most of that growth is happening along coastlines. Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, is one of the fastest sinking cities in the world, and it has around 10.5 million people living there, and about 30 million in the greater metro area. Experts say that by 2030, some parts of the city could be flooded so often or so badly that all these people just won't be able to live there anymore. Jakarta was built on swampy land. It's right next to the Java Sea and has 13 rivers running through it, so flooding has always been a part of life there. But it's gotten worse lately. Scientists say that by 2050, about 95% of North Jakarta could be underwater, and it's already happening. In the last 10 years, North Jakarta sank by over 8 feet, and in some places, it's still sinking up to 10 inches every year. That's more than double what other big coastal cities are experiencing. On average, Jakarta sinks between 1/3 of an inch to 6 inches each year, and now nearly half of the city is already sitting below sea level. So Indonesia found an original solution to this problem and decided to build a brand new city in the jungle to replace Jakarta. They plan to grow Nusantara, the new capital, into a modern, green, and high-tech city in the next 20 years. City planners are calling Nusantara a sponge city, as it should be able to absorb rainwater into the ground like a sponge, instead of letting it flood the streets. That way, even with heavy rain, Nusantara won't flood the way Jakarta has.
You're chilling in Hawaii, on the island of Oahu. A friend calls you up. Hey, I'm here too. Meet me in Maui. Great, but how do you get there? Your first thought is probably to take a ferry, but that's impossible. Hawaii is a pretty unique place. It's the most expensive state to live in. It has its own official language besides English. And it's the only American state made up entirely of islands. Hawaii has a total of 137 islands. 8 are the main ones, but only 6 are open to tourists. And the distance between those islands is probably bigger than you'd expect. For example, traveling from Oahu to the Big Island is around 185 miles, which is about the same distance as Chicago to Indianapolis. You might be surprised that you can't make that trip by boat. In fact, the only ferry system that actually takes passengers in Hawaii runs between Maui and Lanai. That's it. So your only option is to travel between islands is by plane. Honestly, it's a little surprising, especially considering how many people visit Hawaii every year. Tourism pretty much drives their economy, and in the first 8 months of 2024 alone, over 6 million people visited its beautiful beaches. Knowing that, we would expect Hawaii to set up a good ferry system to make it easier for visitors to get around. Just like in Greece. This would probably boost tourism even more, bringing more money to the state. But believe me, authorities and private companies also know that. In fact, they've already tried it. Ferries were a big way of getting around in Hawaii from the 19th century up until the 1950s. Since then, there have been a few attempts to bring back a ferry service, but unfortunately, they have all failed. One of the biggest attempts was the Hawaii Super Ferry, which aimed to provide a fast, affordable boat service between islands. It could carry almost 900 passengers and even allow them to bring their own cars along. The trial run started in 2007, and people were excited, but it turned into a big fiasco. A bunch of legal and environmental issues came up, like concerns about the impact on marine life, especially whales. The courts decided the ferry didn't go through the proper environmental reviews, and that caused a lot of trouble. By 2009, after tons of protests and setbacks, they had to shut it down. If a project like this comes up again, it will probably fail one more time. And there are a few reasons why it's almost impossible to set up a regular ferry system there. Let's start by talking about Hawaii's rough waters. They are deep and wild. Take the Alenoiaha Channel, for example. It's a 30-mile stretch that separates Maui from the Big Island. Its name means Great Billow Smashing Channel, and it lives up to that. It's over 6,000 feet deep, making it one of the most dangerous stretches of water on Earth. The wind there is also super strong, the fastest in Hawaii's coastal waters. But it's not any easier in the rest of the archipelago. The whole region gets hit by storms from the Pacific up north, sending big waves crashing into the islands and making the waters rough and unpredictable. Swells can come from 3, 4, or even more directions, making the sea feel really choppy. Someone who's not used to taking ferry boats would definitely find that, well, uncomfortable, to say the least. To deal with rough seas like this, the ferries have to be really big and strong. But that also makes them more expensive and harder to run than the ones in places like Alaska or Washington State. Another reason it's so tough to set up this system today has to do with marine life. A big ship moving through the shallower waters when docking could really damage the local ecosystem. And there's also the problem that the sea routes are also the migration paths of many sea animals, like humpback whales and spinner dolphins. Not to mention, ferry services can make it easier to spread harmful plants and animals, what experts call invasive species. See, Hawaii's ecosystem is super unique because it's been isolated out in the middle of the Pacific. When we talk about plants and animals that are native to Hawaii, we mean they got there on their own, no humans involved. They arrived with the help of waves, wind, or even birds flying over. But events like these are super rare, so for over 70 million years, their plants and animals didn't have to deal with outside competition. That's made them really fragile. So, when new species get brought in by us, it can be a big problem, and they could end up harming the environment. Hawaii's already been battling invasive species like fire ants, coqui frogs, and meconium, a fast-growing plant from South America that takes over native forests. People there worry that ferries, which carry cars and cargo between islands, could accidentally spread these invaders even more. Like we mentioned at the beginning of the video, the long distances between their lands don't really help either. For example, if you were to travel from Oahu to the big island of Hawaii by boat, it would take around 30 hours, and that's without any stops. The same trip by plane takes about 50 minutes. Ferries that cover long distances are much more expensive, so they need a much bigger demand to make them profitable. On top of that, the state doesn't really have the infrastructure, like enough ports and terminals to support the operations. So setting up new routes is pretty much out of the question. Airplanes, on the other hand, are a different story. The air travel industry in Hawaii is already well established and super competitive. That means flying is still the most practical option in Hawaii. Planes are quick, they don't make you seasick, and are pretty affordable, usually costing around $100 for a round trip. Okay, but what do the locals think about all this? Well, apparently, there isn't a huge demand for residents to commute between the islands all that often. Oahu is the busiest island in Hawaii, with about 70% of the state's population living there. It is where Honolulu, the capital, is located, and where most of the state's business happens. So, people from the other islands usually come over for a specific doctor's appointment or to catch a big concert. And that might happen once or twice a year, no more than that. So, even if people could choose between taking a ferry and a plane for these special occasions, most of them would probably still prefer flying. There are plenty of options between the main island airports. Planes usually start flying around 5 in the morning, and there are flights available every hour until the last one, which is usually at 9 in the evening. If you've been dreaming of going to this paradisiacal place but are worried about spending too much on plane tickets, I have some tips for you. First off, keep in mind that visiting all the main islands in 5 days or less is way too ambitious. So, if you don't have much time to spend there, think about your priorities. Each of the 6 islands open to tourists has its own vibe and activities. But you don't need to visit them all in one trip, and you can save some money by sticking to fewer islands. You can still explore the diversity of the islands by picking 2 that offer a nice contrast to each other. For example, while Oahu has that bustling city energy, Kauai has a much more relaxed vibe. Also, flights in the morning are usually cheaper, and it might be better to fly on a weekday rather than the weekend, although the price difference isn't usually huge. Hopefully these tips will save you some cash while still having an unforgettable island hopping adventure in Hawaii. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who's also dreaming of exploring these amazing islands.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and